Lord of Mysteries, I Became the Mayor of Tingen City by author Qing Jiao Shi. Chapter 101 to 125. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And those who want to support me, I have a Patreon channel. Get early access to video on Patreon. 101 The Truth Revealed. A shower of blood accompanied by white specks spread out, and the stunningly beautiful Mrs. Sharon was transformed into a skull-crushing corpse that would haunt every man's nightmares. Huff, huff. Leonardo and Klein simultaneously lowered their pistols, catching their breath, and glanced at each other. Kenley. Dunsmith's voice suddenly rang out from behind. You are much calmer than I expected. Klein chimed in, saying that Kenley's combat capabilities were far greater than they had anticipated. However, Klein still gave Leonardo a once-over. He's probably wondering how I got rid of Slumber Charm. Just as Klein failed to throw the Slumber Charm, he inevitably entered a dream. However, in his eyes, Kenley, who was only Sequence 9 and rarely participated in dangerous missions, was able to break free from the control of the Slumber Charm before him. Perhaps it's because Slumber Charm is relatively far from Kenley, Klein reassured himself, ceasing his doubts. Leonardo looked at Klein and Dunn without saying a word, only showing surprise at being praised. He scratched his head and chuckled sheepishly. I was lucky, Mrs. Sharon was probably focused on keeping Klein occupied. Luckily, Klein didn't have time to focus on activating spirit vision during the battle, otherwise he would have seen me using simulation, blood thief, to manipulate Mrs. Sharon's threads. He silently explained to himself. The mission is complete, now it's time for the final cleanup. Klein, come to spirit mediumship, Mrs. Sharon. Kenley, go downstairs and check if the servants are still asleep. If anyone has woken up and noticed the commotion, bring them here and have them sign a confidentiality agreement according to procedure. I'll take care of the second floor. Dunn gave the order quickly. Yes. Leonardo and Klein answered in unison. When Klein finished his spirit mediumship and came out with Dunn, Leonardo had already prepared a carriage outside, ready to return to Blackthorn Security Company. Speaking of which, this was really dangerous. Klein sighed softly, recalling Mrs. Sharon's strange and unpredictable abilities. Dunsmith did not respond until Leonardo was seated in the carriage, at which point he turned the reins and drove toward Blackthorn Security Company. In the carriage behind him, Dunn and Klein continued to discuss the spiritual medium ritual they had just witnessed. Captain, I think I know the cause of death for Mayor Connor and Senator Maynard. During the spirit medium ritual, Klein witnessed a secret conversation between Mrs. Sharon and Jeffrey, a member of the Conservative Party. He then recounted what he had seen. Klein did not lower his voice. After all, in his and Dunn's eyes, the one driving the carriage was Kenley White, a member of the Nighthawks, so there was no need to hide it. After listening to Klein's description, Dunn nodded slightly in response. Once we get back to Blackthorn Security Company, you should draft a report on all of this and submit it to the Holy See. In any case, that Conservative Party member was the mastermind behind Mayor Connor and Congressman Maynard. As for Lady Sharon, she's dead, but we know her background, we know about the Demoness sect, and she had some connection with Trissa. We also need to report this to the Holy See, hiss. Dunn suddenly remembered something and added. Klein, do you remember the woman who suddenly saved Trissa when we were hunting her down? Klein astutely grasped the crux of the Dunn problem. You mean Mrs. Sharon rescued Trissa? It was too dark at the time, and there was fog, so I couldn't see anything clearly. Dunn did not respond further and fell into deep thought. Leonardo sat in the driver's seat, jerking the reins sharply, a surge of excitement coursing through him. Dunsmith did not consume old Neil's Beander characteristic, Kenley was not dead, and Dunn did not consume the Beander characteristic left behind by Kenley. His pollution level should be at its lowest point by now. Leonardo silently cheered himself on. It is certain that Ince Zangwill's plans have now been largely sabotaged by him in secret. It's so exciting to think about. Leonardo paid no attention to the conversation in the carriage behind him, and waved the reins faster and faster, causing the carriage to speed up as well. Inside Blackthorn Security Company. The return journey was a full 10 minutes shorter than the outbound journey, and Klein and Dunn both staggered off the train. They all guessed that Kenley was probably excited because it was his first time completing such a dangerous mission, and that he was driving the carriage back more vigorously than he had on the way there, which might have made the passengers more prone to motion sickness. As Dunn and Klein got out of the car and were about to step into Blackthorn Security Company, Klein suddenly exclaimed in surprise. Where is Kenley? Klein turned his head to look back at the ink-black night, where he could only see the dim yellow glow of the streetlights intertwined with the moonlight of crimson, but he couldn't see Kenley's figure. He should be back in the recreation room by now, Klein. Go and draft the report. Dunn didn't pay much attention, he pushed a side door and walked straight into the captain's office. Klein no longer had any doubts, went into the clerk's office, and sat down at the typewriter. Inside the recreation lounge, Kenley and Fry were playing Gwent at the card table when they suddenly heard the carriage stop and the captain and Klein talking. The captain and the others have returned from their mission. I wonder what kind of mission it was. Kenley asked Yehuda. Fry nodded, but did not respond, remaining silent. Leonardo's new apartment. Leonard remained standing across the street, staring idly at Leonardo's room. Even though the lights were off, he could still make out the details inside. He would occasionally turn his head to the side, muttering to himself. He had been monitoring the area for a long time, from evening until midnight, and what struck him as odd was that James seemed to sleep very quietly, hardly ever turning over. Moreover, his breathing was very faint, almost non-existent. Seemingly realizing some danger, Leonard swiftly climbed onto the windowsill, pushing open the open window. The moonlight in crimson cast a long shadow of him, illuminating the ground and James on the bed. Strange, how come his breathing has returned to normal? Leonard nimbly leapt into the room through the window frame. His footsteps were very light as he approached James, who was sleeping in bed. Once Leonard was sure James was really asleep, he skillfully climbed out the window again and returned to the other side of the street. Shortly after he left, James woke up suddenly in bed. Leonard stared out the window, still shaken, at Crimson's moon outside. He breathed a sigh of relief. This guy is very perceptive. Luckily I came in when he climbed up, but there wasn't time to deal with the body. Leonard got up under the moonlight, his movements very subtle, and looked down at the floorboards. There lay the body he was going to use as a replacement. Leonardo quickly pulled out the variable curtain and moved the body. After doing all this, Leonardo finally felt at ease and went to bed, falling into a deep sleep. 102 New content. Inside a house with a dilapidated garden on the outskirts of Tingen City. Zhangwil awoke from a deep sleep, his first instinct being to check on his condition. This is something he does every day, because he has no idea what stories, 008, will weave or what surprises it will bring after he falls asleep. After confirming that he was not injured, Zhangwil put on his shiny leather boots and stood up. As expected, he saw 008 sitting quietly on the desk, like a very ordinary and common quill pen. However, it was locked inside a metal box with layers of symbols and magical markings last night. Zhangwil walked over solemnly, grasped 008 in one hand, and opened the notebook beside him with the other, finding that it had nearly a page of additional text. Last night, a mysterious person unexpectedly approached Zhangwil's secret hideout. Zhangwil noticed the arrival of the mysterious man, and he vaguely sensed that another soul resided within that mysterious man. Furthermore, he possesses a contamination that Zhangwil fears, which may stem from the mysterious man's Beander ability, or mystical item. In short, Zhangwil did not alert the enemy, and the mysterious man's focus did not seem to be on him at all. Zhangwil couldn't understand why someone would suddenly appear outside his secret hideout. Zhangwil flipped back to the pages of his previously written plans. He suddenly realized that there were many more traces of scribbling on his original plan, so Zhangwil began to examine it carefully. Mrs. Sharon was exposed, targeted by the Nighthawk squad, and arrested. Klein Moretti, Dunn Smith, and Kenley White formed a group and applied for sealed artifact 3027. However, during the battle, Kenley White, a new member of the Nighthawks, lacked sufficient combat experience and, contrary to Zhangwil's expectations, did not panic and direct the 3027 directly at Mrs. Sharon, resulting in his own death from the backlash. The truth is, this new Nighthawks member displayed considerable experience and seemed to have a deep understanding of Mrs. Sharon's Beander abilities. For some reason, and inexplicably, Kenley White was able to cast Marauder. Pathway Sequence 6 feet Prometheus possessed the Beander ability. He stole Mrs. Sharon's Beander ability and, together with Klein Moretti and Dunn Smith, killed Mrs. Sharon. He is not dead, nor would he have left behind any Beander characteristics. Dunn Smith was not contaminated as a result. Zhangwil picked up his quill and continued writing on a new page. On September 9, Megos inexplicably went to Blackthorn Security Company. He felt a deep unease and hoped to get help from the Nighthawks. She was clearly not due to give birth yet, but strangely she was about to give birth. Dunn made detailed and correct arrangements, but he made one mistake. If he was determined to deal with Megos immediately, he should have lured him into Channy's Gate and used the environment and available items to his advantage. If he was planning to wait for help, he should never have taken out Saint Selena's ashes. However, the death of his old friend Old Neil left him in a state of extreme grief, making it difficult for him to make the right decisions. Dunsmith made a bizarre and fatal mistake. He actually produced the ashes of a saint. The fetus inside Megos's womb sensed the stimulation from the saint's ashes, so it began to frantically draw power from the mother's body, attempting to be born prematurely, even if it wasn't truly mature. Megos has become a real monster. The battle has begun. September 9th. While wearing a police uniform and on duty in the Golden Sycamore district, Leonardo suddenly saw a gray fog spreading before him, followed by a deep red light. Through the layers of gray fog, he saw the figure of the fool Klein. Tomorrow's tarot gathering is cancelled. The fool's voice faded, but Leonardo's emotions remained unsettled for a long time. He knew all too well what this meant. This means the real battle is about to begin. Megos is heading to Blackthorn Security Company, and Dunsmith is about to be sacrificed. Ince Zangwill is about to reveal his true colors. Leonardo lost interest in continuing his patrol duties. Just then, a rather outstanding woman in her early 20s, with a smooth forehead, long golden hair, emerald green eyes, and a melancholic and serene demeanor, came up to him and struck up a conversation. She wore a lotus leaf hat and a loose skirt, and her round belly made her look very nervous and uneasy. "Hello, officer." A woman's voice rang out, but it failed to pull Leonardo back to reality. Philip, who was standing next to him, stepped forward and asked, "Good afternoon, beautiful lady. How can I help you? Your forehead is sweating. It looks like your child is about to be born. You shouldn't be leaving the door at this time." Philip wore a smile. His mud-stained boots from the last operation had been polished to a shine. Jacob didn't speak, but he still stepped forward, and when he looked at the pregnant woman again, his gaze softened considerably. "Thank you for your kindness, officer." The woman forced a smile, but tears welled up in her eyes. "It's like this, my husband, he's gone," the woman sobbed uncontrollably. "Since it wasn't a missing person case, the police department didn't take my case, so I'm going to Blackthorn Security Company. The security personnel there promised to help me find my husband. My child. I can feel that he is about to be born. I can't let my child be without a father." Philip patted the woman on the shoulder and gently comforted her. "Madam, please don't worry. If you haven't found your husband by the time your child is born, you can apply to the government for charitable assistance. Have you forgotten that it was thanks to our great Mayor Connor that the Charity Foundation was established? Although he has passed away, Mr. Drake is now in charge of the Charity Foundation's operations, and he would certainly be happy to help you and your children." The woman wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes. "Thank you, officer, but I still need to go to Blackthorn Security Company." Philip smiled and offered directions in a friendly manner. 26 Zoutland Street, 2nd floor. "Since you've entrusted them with this, remember their address." The woman nodded in thanks. "I forgot, my memory has been getting worse and worse ever since I got pregnant with this child." With the keen senses of a seasoned police officer, Jacob noticed something was amiss with the woman before him, so he blurted out a question. "Madam, may I ask your name?" The woman replied, "Megos. 103 Megos. Megos." Leonardo snapped back to reality. His gaze was fixed on Megos's retreating figure. He turned to the two of them and said, his eyes shining brightly, "I'll see that lady off, then I'll rejoin the team later." Jacob and Philip both nodded slightly, offering no objection. Immediately afterwards, Leonardo's pace changed from a brisk walk to a jog, and then to a sprint, but he only saw Megos getting further and further away from him, and he couldn't keep up at all. Blackthorn Security Company. Klein was reading the newspaper in the front hall when he suddenly looked up and saw Megos, who had unexpectedly come to visit. "Ms. Megos, what brings you to our Blackthorn Security Company? Is there anything you need us to do?" Klein stepped forward and asked. Megos touched her belly and smiled faintly. "I don't know why, but I suddenly wanted to come to Zoutland Street and take a look." Immediately afterward, Klein was about to use spirit vision to observe Megos when he was suddenly stopped by a strong sense of crisis. Klein stood rooted to the spot like a statue, his forehead beaded with cold sweat. His smile froze as he suddenly understood the letter Lenevis had left behind. "Haha, congratulations. Congratulations on finally finding this letter. This shows that you are not too stupid or too slow-witted, and are qualified to participate in this game of life and death that I have designed. Child laborers who die young, factory workers who rarely live past 10 years due to the harsh environment and hardship, female workers who risk serious illness for meager wages. I see countless resentments shrouding every factory, making the surroundings oppressive and gloomy. This is the worst of times, and the best of times. Our game will begin against this backdrop. Fools, get ready, I'm about to give you a hint." Ladies and gentlemen, my hint is that I have planted a bomb in Tingen City, a bomb that will grow stronger over time. Go find it, and take care of it before it explodes on its own. If the game fails, boom. The entire Tingen City will be reduced to ruins. Believe me, I haven't lied about anything in this matter. Lenevis loves to surprise his friends the most. This is the content of that letter. Klein immediately understood what Lenevis meant by the bomb. The bomb he mentioned was his child. Megos' baby. Klein looked at Leonard and noticed that the other man had also shown obvious fear. So, Klein used his clown ability to force a smile, winked at Leonard, and gestured with his lip. Would you like coffee, black tea, or nothing at all? A glass of warm water. I suddenly feel like talking to you about Lenevis. I feel like you know a lot. Having received a reply, Klein turned and went into the captain's office, leaving Leonard alone to deal with Megos. Leonard and Megos chatted idly, trying hard to suppress the unease deep within their hearts. He forced a smile, pointing to the sofa area, and said, "That's exactly what I wanted to say, and we'd also like to talk to you about Lenevis." After chatting for a while, Leonard finally broke free from his stiffness and began to talk about the newly discovered house where Lenevis had rented. Really? He never told me that. Megos frowned slightly and gave a fairly normal answer. After saying that, she grabbed a handful of her blonde hair and casually threw it into the trash can next to her. Leonard paused for a moment, swallowed hard, and cold sweat broke out on his palms again. "Captain Klein, why aren't you back yet?" Leonard thought to himself in a state of near collapse, but he still told himself to stay calm, not to provoke Megos, and to wait for rescue. Until Klein, wrapped around the thick vein of the blood thief, slowly walked up the underground steps and returned step by step. Roseanne and Mrs. Oriana have both gone home, leaving only Klein, Dunn, Leonard, and Sika, who is in charge of guarding Channy's gate, at the entire Blackthorn Security Company. He saw Dunn Smith at the door of the Nighthawk's lounge and was about to speak when a figure in a brand new police uniform stumbled into the main door of Blackthorn Security Company. "James?" Klein asked in surprise, and he and Dunn Smith both looked wary, fearing that the other was also a hidden bomb. However, James didn't even glance at Dunn and Klein. He looked around the entire hall and walked straight into the reception room. Pushing open the door, Leonardo saw Megos and Leonard chatting on the sofa. As Leonardo walked in from behind, he clearly noticed the cold sweat on Leonard's back. He was still in shock and doubt when his gaze finally settled on Megos' hand. Immediately, a bright light shone in his eyes again, and he said to Leonard, "Go out." Leonard already had this intention, and under the influence of Leonardo's psychological suggestion, he did not hesitate at all and turned to leave the reception room. Clang! The moment Leonard stepped out of the reception room, the large door slammed shut and locked tightly. Leonard suddenly realized what was happening, abruptly raising his head to look at Dunn Smith and Klein Moretti. Dunn and Moretti frowned as well. Klein handed the blood thief to Leonard and then quickly stepped forward to turn the door handle. Click-clack. The door handle is locked and difficult to open. "Captain, the door is locked from the inside. What was that policeman trying to do?" Klein turned around abruptly, his clothes soaked with cold sweat. He felt that the whole day had been too coincidental and strange. "Kick the door away." Dunn Smith let out a rare roar. Comma 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 comma. Inside the reception room, Leonardo's eyes were fixed on Megos. Megos, slightly annoyed, kept picking up his glass to drink water, his face contorted as he looked at Leonardo and said, "It's you, officer. Thanks to your companion for showing me the way, I was able to get here safely." Leonardo sat down, feigning composure, and said softly, "Miss Megos, you're about to give birth, right? How about I take you to the hospital?" Megos didn't answer, she raised her hand and scratched her face. "My face is a little itchy." Tear. Megos ripped a blood-soaked chunk of flesh from his own face. Leonardo's pupils contracted, and he immediately recalled the dream he had not long ago. In that dream, he became Megas. In that dream, Megos also tore off the flesh from his face and pulled out his hair. The evil god's offspring inside her has already sensed the danger emanating from Saint Selena's ashes. The situation is irreversible. We must deal with her now. Leonardo's eyes narrowed, and he quickly drew his pistol. "Officer, what are you doing? Why are you pointing a gun at me? I didn't do anything wrong. My child, he did nothing wrong. You're going to kill my child." Megos screamed hysterically, but the sound was not normal. It was a high-pitched, thin sound, like Wraith's painful wail, which was at the edge of the limits of human hearing. When the sound reached Leonardo's ears, a violent headache struck, making him feel as if his skull was being cracked open. Leonardo struggled to maintain accuracy, tensing the muscles in his forearm. "Pull the trigger." Bang! The bullet flew out with a thud. What did you do? Klein broke through the door and entered. He roared at Leonardo. 104 returning the saint's ashes. Click. The dream shattered instantly. Inside the reception hall, Megos was fast asleep, her face filled with restlessness. Leonard, Klein, Roseanne, and Mrs. Oriana all collapsed to the ground and entered a dream. Dunn Smith also lay on the ground, still cradling Saint Selena's ashes in his arms. Leonardo approached the hall, the number 2081 on his fingertips gleaming with a dark luster. He took out the variable curtain and covered the silver urn, its surface covered with intricate patterns. When he pulled back the variable curtain, the urn disappeared without him noticing, leaving Dunn in his arms with a blood-stained, black and white, eerie eyeball. This is the Beander characteristic left behind by old Neil, which Leonardo took away. After doing all this, Leonardo stood at the Blackthorn Security Company's doorway, bowed deeply to the people lying on the ground, trapped into slumber, then covered himself with the variable curtain and vanished into thin air. Dunn Smith was the first to wake up. He looked at the eerie eyeball in his arms and at the Nighthawks who were all lying on the ground asleep, and instantly became fully awake. Saint Selena's ashes have mysteriously disappeared. Megos's condition has improved significantly, she is no longer restless, but she remains immersed in her dream and cannot extricate herself from it. Blackthorn Security Company Underground. Team Leader. The walls on both sides of the corridor are inlaid with gas lamps enclosed by metal grids, and there is a darkness emblem at intervals on the walls. Walking through it can bring peace of mind. Sika, who was in the duty room, looked at Dunn Smith, who had suddenly returned. Dunn looked extremely tired. He carried a silver urn in his hands and dragged his heavy steps toward Channy's gate. He didn't speak, but simply nodded slightly to Sika. In his gray eyes, there was a barely perceptible hint of deep blue. This is Leonardo using his faceless ability to impersonate someone. Leonardo bypassed Sika, who was on guard duty, and arrived at Channy's gate. Thump, 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 thump. A sudden, intense knocking sound rang out, echoing in the dim, quiet corridor and in the almost deserted underground. A large, double-leaf iron door, engraved with 7 holy symbols, appeared before Leonardo. A heavy knocking sound came from behind the door, shaking the large iron door. Now that the crisis above is resolved, let's put Saint Selena's ashes back. Leonardo mimicked Dunn Smith's tone and gave the order to Sika. Yes. Sika agreed and turned to walk towards Channy's gate. Immediately afterwards, Sika pushed open a doorway and slipped inside. When she came out again, she was followed by an elderly man with deep wrinkles and thinning hair. He was wearing a black classical robe and carrying a lantern. The old man asked in confusion. Dunn, is the matter really resolved? Leonardo continued to mimic Dunn Smith's usual style, nodding slightly in response. We don't need this for now. He then added. Channy's gate needs the ashes of a saint more. The old man didn't suspect much, he simply took the silver urn from Leonardo's hand and tapped it 4 times on his chest. May the goddess bless you. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man's figure completely disappeared behind the door, and the heavy black iron door closed tightly behind him. Luckily I made it in time. Leonardo comforted himself, turned around, and prepared to return to the 2nd floor. Before leaving, he gave Sika some instructions. Continue to guard this place. No matter what happens up there, do not leave. Yes. Sika once again solemnly agreed. Leonardo was halfway down the stairs when he suddenly heard heavy footsteps coming from above. He quickly slipped into the shadows, used the variable curtain to cover his entire body again, and disappeared. Dunn Smith frowned and hurried down into the ground. After walking down the long corridor, Sika saw Captain Dunn Smith appear at the end of her line of sight once again. Why is the captain back again? Sika wondered to herself, her heart clenching with anxiety. Team leader, she asked, clearly somewhat nervously. Could it be that the issue above hasn't been resolved, but has instead worsened? Sika, who had never even seen a draft published, had countless guesses popping into her mind. Dunn Smith walked up to Sika, his tone serious, and his expression unusually flustered. Saint Selena's ashes have been lost. Sika exclaimed, ah, and opened her mouth wide. Captain, you just returned Saint Selena's ashes, Sika continued, have you forgotten? Dunn was clearly taken aback. But seeing Channy's gate as quiet as ever, as calm as usual, he lowered his head somewhat insecurely, put one hand in his trench coat pocket, and touched that eerie eyeball. Could it really be a problem with my memory? Dunn paused for a second, then suddenly realized something and began to make connections. No, I made a mistake, I haven't lost my memory. Megos's belly contains evil god's offspring, which is what I just saw in that dream. And what would evil god's offspring do if it sensed a threat from the ashes of a saint? It will frantically absorb nutrients from the mother, and even if it is not fully mature, it will give birth prematurely in order to save itself. Dun suddenly realized, who exactly is it? It's clear that someone used the power of nightmare to pull us all into a dream, and then stole the saint's ashes and returned them. But how did he manage to impersonate me and fool Sika? Countless suspicions arose in Dun's mind, and he immediately recalled the scene when Trissa was captured. He clearly remembered that the assassinated Mayor Connor had once used the nightmare ability to control Trissa. In Dun's mind, the image of Leonardo Mayor Connor suddenly appearing and resolving the crisis that was originally the Nighthawk's responsibility kept flashing through his mind. He suddenly remembered that back in Selena's time, after using the magic mirror for divination, he received a report from Klein and used his dream to investigate Leonardo Mayor Connor. He also remembered the words Leonard Mayor Connor had spoken in his dream. I will protect Tingen with you. Outskirts of Tingen City. The exterior of a house with a dilapidated garden. Leonardo suddenly appeared. I returned Saint Selena's ashes to Channy's gate, and since Zhangwill's plans have been exposed, he obviously can't stay in Tingen any longer. That's why Dun Smith won't have to sacrifice himself. If Ince Zhangwill still wants to get back Saint Selena's ashes, he has to rely on Dun's status as the Nighthawk's captain. As for Klein, hey, he's also constantly sabotaging Ince Zhangwill's plans. Ince Zhangwill will surely use various coincidences to kill him, right? Who cares? Klein can be resurrected anyway. Leonardo snapped out of his thoughts, feeling immense satisfaction at having successfully thwarted Ince Zhangwill's plan. He slowly stood up and looked around. He felt that he seemed to be familiar with this place, as if he had been here before, without even realizing it. His gaze fell on the garden that was beginning to decay. Strange, it's only the beginning of September, why are these flowers already withering? Leonardo suddenly realized a problem. He suddenly recalled Ince Zhangwill's description of the Tingen City outpost. It has gardens that begin to wither in early September and dark red chimneys. Chapter 105 Since Zhangwill. This is Ince Zhangwill's base. Damn it, how did the variable curtain end up here? Leonardo's heart sank, and he turned his head to look inside the room. The heavy curtains inside the house were tightly drawn, blocking out the sunlight and the view. Inside, only a kerosene lamp provided dim lighting, and the candlelight flickered in the still air. On the desktop, on the open notebook, there were many marks of scribbles and corrections, covering almost the entire page. On September 9th, Megos inexplicably went to Blackthorn Security Company. He felt a deep unease and hoped to get help from the Nighthawks. She was clearly not due to give birth yet, but strangely she was about to give birth. Dun made detailed and correct arrangements, but he made one mistake. If he was determined to deal with Megos immediately, he should have lured him into Channy's gate and used the environment and available items to his advantage. If he was planning to wait for help, he should never have taken out Saint Selena's ashes. However, the death of his old friend Old Neil left him in a state of extreme grief, making it difficult for him to make the right decisions. Dun Smith made a bizarre and fatal mistake. He actually produced the ashes of a saint. Large areas of smearing marks begin to appear here. The assassin, Officer James, who stole Nighthawks member Old Neil's Beander characteristic, suddenly appeared. He keenly sensed Megos' panic. In fact, Megos had asked James and his team members Jacob and Philip for directions before coming to Blackthorn Security Company. What is puzzling and lacks sufficient reason is that James, as an assassin, strangely unleashed the Beander ability, Nightmare, belonging to the sleepless pathway. Furthermore, even Dun Smith, who is already a Sequence 6, was inevitably controlled by Nightmare. Perhaps he was just too tired and lacked sleep recently, which is also an important reason why he made the wrong judgment and took out Saint Selena's ashes. Then, just like the Mayor Leonardo Mayor Connor whom he had assassinated, James seemed to know Ince Zhangwill's true purpose, which was Saint Selena's ashes. So, he used the mystical item to replace the saint's ashes, and then he once again displayed his inexplicable Beander ability, and he actually changed his appearance and became Dun Smith. After transforming into Dun Smith, he used Saint Selena's ashes to fool Sika, who was on duty, and former Nighthawks members, and successfully returned Saint Selena's ashes. He can change his appearance and unleash different Beander abilities, even those that surpass his own sequence. Crucially, James was also aware of Ince Zhangwill's plans and, after assassinating Leonardo Mayor Connor, began to frequently appear in Ince Zhangwill's plans to interfere and sabotage them. So, did James really succeed in assassinating Leonardo Mayor Connor? Ince Zhangwill keenly sensed this and realized that Leonardo Mayor Connor was not actually dead. He had laid a series of traps and successfully switched places when James attempted to assassinate him. The real James was killed by him, while Leonardo Mayor Connor took his place and continued to secretly stop Ince Zangwill step by step. Haha, Ince Zangwill's plan, which he had been plotting for months, has been completely ruined. Kenley and Dunn, who were supposed to be dead, are still alive. Old Neil's Beander characteristic was not consumed by Dunn, but was stolen by Leonardo in the guise of James. Megos also successfully and safely brought the situation under control after the mandated punishers arrived. Now Ince Zangwill has been completely exposed. He has missed the best opportunity to obtain the saint's ashes, and the red gloves of the Church of the Evernight Goddess are rushing to Tingen to arrest Ince Zangwill. Time is running out for Ince Zangwill. Ince Zangwill's pale fingers picked up the quill pen and continued writing after scribbling large sections. Leonardo Mayor Connor unexpectedly arrived outside Ince Zangwill's house. Leonardo looked into the room, and when he saw the heavy curtains, he noticed a pale finger slowly emerging from behind them. The curtains were opened a crack. Leonardo's pupils contracted sharply as he met the blue, almost black eyes observing him from behind the curtains. That's Ince Zangwill. With just a fleeting glance, Leonardo guessed the true identity of the person behind the curtain. The curtains were suddenly pulled open, and the sunlight was blinding, allowing Leonardo to see the other person's true face clearly. The man wore a double-breasted, pure black clerical robe and a soft cap. His hair was dark gold. He had a high nose bridge, tightly pursed lips, and features that resembled a classical sculpture, without a single wrinkle. Apart from his deep blue eyes, one of his eyes was blind. This is the most representative characteristic of Ince Zangwill. Wearing a soft hat and blind in one eye, Ince Zangwill also raised his clenched left fist at the same moment, spreading his 5 fingers and pointing his palm at Leonardo. In an instant, the decaying garden was shrouded in a shocking yellow-green mist, and in front of Ince Zangwill, an illusory light first burst forth, then rapidly rotated around a point, collapsed inward, and constructed a slightly blurry double bronze door. The surface of this bronze door is covered with all sorts of mysterious patterns, giving it an indescribable sense of depth and deathly stillness. With a creak, the large door shook and a crack appeared. Beyond the crack lies an impenetrable darkness, like the deepest and most profound night sky. Pairs of indescribable eyes were hidden in the deep darkness, densely packed everywhere, yet their specific shapes remained unseen. Bloody arms without panels stretched out, dark green vines that resembled baby faces spread out, and hands with gaping mouths and teeth reached out, screaming, laughing, crying, shouting, and scrambling to grab everything outside. This brought a terrifying suction force, and a hurricane so cold it could freeze one's bones suddenly arose, pushing things toward those strange things, toward the crevices of the bronze door. The yellow-green, poisonous fog was cleared away in an instant, and Leonardo involuntarily leaned forward, staggering as he walked. The ring on his fingertip gleamed a dark red, resembling a vein filled with fresh blood. Leonardo raised his arm, aiming it at Ince Zangwill in front of him. He simulated the blood thief's abilities and attempted to steal them. I don't know anything about the death pathway's abilities. I can only try my luck. Although Blood Thief originates from Prometheus, its ability to steal is more probabilistic. Facing a mid-sequence powerhouse of Sequence 5, Leonardo really couldn't be sure which of the opponent's various Beander abilities he would be able to steal. As for 2081, Leonardo didn't even consider it. Putting aside the fact that Ince Zangwill is the 5th in a mid-sequence, Leonardo himself clearly didn't understand the principles behind its Beander capabilities. As he spread his 5 fingers, the scene before him changed, with clusters of dazzling lights of different colors replacing the corresponding people and objects. These lights are constantly changing and flashing rapidly, making it difficult to grasp the underlying patterns. Through this perspective, Leonardo discovered that within Ince Zangwill, there was a shared radiance, seemingly fragmented but actually unified. He immediately and calmly closed his right hand, grasped one of the luminous points, and rotated his wrist to the right. Suddenly, Leonardo saw the dark light being drawn away and partially absorbed into his body. This is the symbol corresponding to words of the dead. He stole Ince Zangwill's words of the dead. 106 words of filth. Leonardo barely managed to steady himself, resisting the powerful suction emanating from the bronze door. Immediately afterwards, from Leonardo's mouth, a language completely incomprehensible to normal beings slowly emerged, and the surroundings became even darker, both hazy and illusory. Leonardo opened his mouth again, and one awkward, difficult, harsh, and completely incomprehensible word after another came out of his mouth. At the same time, the hurricane created by the terrifying suction of the bronze door suddenly calmed down, making the already dim environment even more gloomy. This, Words of the Dead, is an advanced level of spirit medium ability, elevating direct communication between spirits to a form of control, or even enslavement. Language is incomprehensible to living beings echoed on the foredeck, and Ince Zangwill inevitably froze in place, a transparent layer quickly appearing on the surface of his clergy-robed body. His spirit was being pulled by an illusory force. Seizing the opportunity, Leonardo pulled out the variable curtain with his left hand and shook it in midair. All sorts of items that he had marked before started appearing. Lots of talismans, corpses to be used as replacements, and all sorts of materials needed for ritual magic. Leonardo grabbed one talisman after another in midair, quickly identified them, infused them with spirituality, and threw them haphazardly toward Ince Zangwill. Slumber, soul-soothing, electric shock, floating. In an instant, all sorts of spells were attached to Leonardo and Ince Zangwill. A deep crimson light, capable of calming and soothing wraiths and necromancers, intertwined, and countless arcs of electricity pierced through the bronze door, striking the window in front of Ince Zangwill and shattering the glass. Leonardo floated lightly in midair, holding the last iron-black talisman in his hand. This was exactly the words of filth that Leonardo had prepared long ago to deal with Ince Zangwill. Without the slightest hesitation, Leonardo tossed the words of filth directly at Ince Zangwill, where it landed in front of him. Leonardo's lips moved, and the word, Ancient Hermes, uttered. Filthy. 3 seconds later, the voice of True Creator descended upon the material world and entered the ear of the being closest to him. And that talisman was right at Ince Zangwill's feet. The iron-black talisman, adorned with numerous symbolic symbols and eerie patterns, melted away. Ince Zangwill had just regained some composure and broken free from the influence of the words of the dead, when he saw a thick, dark aura and heard a delirious murmur containing a wealth of knowledge and extreme madness. No human could describe the sound precisely. All the blood vessels in Ince Zangwill's head bulged as if they were about to explode. Leonardo had no interest whatsoever in watching Ince Zangwill be tormented by the words of filth. He was perfectly aware that Ince Zangwill could not possibly die from it, and that Leonardo himself would be killed in one blow once he successfully resisted the influence of the mad incantations. Therefore, Leonardo's fingertip 2081 changed color again. Click. In an instant, he dispersed like the moon reflected in the lake and disappeared. After Leonardo disappeared, the numbers 008, which were lying flat on the table in the room, began to write on their own. Leonardo Mayor Connor unexpectedly arrived outside Ince Zangwill's house. Ince Zangwill immediately took action, using his Beander ability to kill this guy who frequently ruined his plans. However, all sorts of unexpected things can happen in the heat of battle. Leonardo Mayor Connor's strength clearly exceeded his sequence and also exceeded Ince Zangwill's expectations. Leonardo Mayor Connor seems to possess a way of simulating other pathways. He used the Beander's mystical item to simulate the sealed artifact 2015, Blood Thief, located beneath the Chinese Gate in the Blackthorn Security Company, stealing Ince Zangwill's Beander ability, Words of the Dead. He then used this Beander ability to control Ince Zangwill, giving Leonardo an opportunity to attack. Besides mystical item, Leonardo Mayor Connor also knows how to make all sorts of spells. He can make basic spells for Evernight Goddess and Church of Storms, and he can even make a strange spell that Ince Zangwill has never seen before, which can bring the True Creator's whispers to the material world. This doesn't seem to affect Ince Zangwill. He's hearing the mad ramblings from the True Creator, and is trying to resist, digesting them to prevent them from spiraling out of control. Incredible. Ince Zangwill resisted the mad ravings of the True Creator, and he even benefited from it. This benefit could even allow him to meet the requirements for promotion to Sequence 4. If Zangwill accepts, he will become a devout follower of True Creator. However, Leonardo Mayor Connor has already escaped and his whereabouts are unknown. Since Ince Zangwill has already received benefits from True Creator, he is not in a hurry to kill the guy who ruined his plans. From another perspective, Ince Zangwill should also thank Leonardo Mayor Connor. However, before leaving, Ince Zangwill decided to take revenge on another guy who ruined his plans. Ince Zangwill decides to create a series of coincidences to kill Klein Moretti. He keenly sensed that this unexpectedly resurrected fellow might become a serious threat to him in the future. Townhouse is located on Daffodil Street. On the second floor, in Leonardo's newly rented room, the mirror in the corner had shattered, with glass shards scattered all over the floor. Leonardo's figure was gradually outlined in the mirror. He was in a bad state, feeling as if his brain was working at an excessively high speed, almost turning him into an idiot. I've been using 2081 for too long today. Leonardo sat on the bed, trying to control his racing thoughts. He first found the last remaining slumber charm, held it tightly in his hand, and infused it with only a trace of spirituality. In this way, the spell would not pull him into a deep sleep, but would merely allow Leonardo to enter a state of calm and tranquility to counteract his frantically racing thoughts. Of course, the best solution to combat this side effect is nothing more than praying to the full Qing to pull you into above the gray fog, where the gray fog can block some of the side effects and restore your own condition. Thinking of this, Leonardo quickly took out the candles, placed them on the ground, and took 4 steps backward. Fool who doesn't belong to this era. The mysterious ruler above the gray fog. The king of yellow and black, who holds the key to good fortune. Huh, why isn't Qing responding to me? Leonardo waited for a while but did not receive a response from Qing. Normally, Qing would act quickly after receiving a prayer. This is very unlike Qing, or Foal, the kind of evil god who acts like that. However, Leonardo didn't dwell on why Qing wasn't responding. It was likely because he was busy at the moment. Although you can't go above the gray fog, these side effects can be recovered over time. 107 Farewell. Raphael Cemetery. Over the course of several days, Leonardo, having successfully eliminated the side effects of 2081, continued to impersonate James, presenting flowers to James's sister and old Neil. As soon as I arrived here, I heard a faint sobbing sound not far away. Following the sound, Leonardo saw Nighthawks and his group. His heart jumped into his throat. Strange. I clearly ruined Ince Zangwill's plan, and he seems to have already left Tingen. Who else in the Nighthawks has been killed? With a question in mind, Leonardo stepped forward and went to a spot not far from the crowd. He saw Dunn Smith with gray hair and gray eyes, wearing a trench coat. He saw Leonard with dark hair and black eyes, exuding a poetic air. He saw Fry with a pale face. He saw the author. Sika, Luo Yao, Kenley, Roseanne, and Mrs. Oriana. He looked around again, but still couldn't see that familiar figure. Dunn, Leonard, Benson, and others placed a heavy coffin into a pre-dug pit. After the pastor's eulogy and everyone's prayers, the soil began to fill the coffin, gradually covering it. Melissa, dressed in a black dress, squatted down, tears welling in her eyes, and threw a copper whistle into the pit. The tombstone bears a black and white photograph of Qing. After saying goodbye one by one, the Blackthorn Security Company staff left. As afternoon approached and evening drew near, Melissa and Benson reluctantly departed. Leonardo only dared to approach the tombstone after Raphael's cemetery was completely empty, and offered white hibiscus flowers. He looked up and saw the 3 lines of epitaph on the tombstone. The best older brother. My best younger brother. The best colleague. Leonardo suddenly smiled. He really wanted to add a sentence at the very bottom. The best cult leader. Despite knowing that Qing would soon be resurrected, a somber atmosphere still lingered in Leonardo's heart. To be honest, he envied Qing for having his own family. Whether he was at a normal job or a dangerous person, Melissa and Benson would wait for him to come home. Inside Blackthorn Security Company, there's Roseanne, who loves gossiping with Qing, and Mrs. Oriana, who's used to Qing coming to her for expense reimbursement and calls Qing Little Moretti. Quote, during the mission, there is a reliable team leader and trustworthy team members. But what about Leonardo himself? From the very first day he transmigrated, he was at the center of a storm of various forces. Everyone wanted him dead, and everyone could accept his death. How come there's such a big difference between us, even though we're both time travelers? Leonardo stared at Qing's black and white photograph for a long time before shaking his head, a smile playing on his lips, and preparing to leave. His steps suddenly stopped. Leonardo turned around and looked back, muttering something. See you in Backland. The moonlight in crimson illuminated the cemetery, creating an indescribable sense of quiet and desolation. In the very center of the cemetery, perhaps driven by complex feelings for Qing, Leonardo ran to his own tombstone, wondering if anyone still cared about him. However, he waited from afternoon until late at night, but no one came. Leonardo sighed silently in his heart. Maybe it's because Elizabeth, Gawain, and Drake all believe I'm still alive. This was a statement he made to comfort himself. So, having composed himself, Leonardo stood up again. He looked at his black and white photograph, then bent down to put down the deep sleep flower in his hand. Leonardo gazed one last time at his own tombstone, but instead of bowing, he smiled. To be honest, it's really strange to offer myself white flowers, he concluded. Bye-bye, Leonardo Mayor Connor. Leonardo's next plan is to go to Backland. In the past few months in Tingen City, he has realized that he has always been too weak. Whether it was facing Annie Hina at the beginning, or Trissa, Mrs. Sharon, or even Ince Zangwill, he was only able to survive and escape after he was fully prepared. He firmly believes that if he were to encounter other Beyonders without any preparation, he would be instantly defeated. However, the reality is that the Lord of the Mysteries will not continue as depicted in the book, but will instead experience a series of chain reactions triggered by his arrival. I won't tell myself who the enemy is or what their Beyonder ability is in every battle. Therefore, he is going to Backland to seek more opportunities for advancement and to become a high-sequence expert as soon as possible. Moreover, the path to godhood remains uncertain. Becoming a god on a pathway with an existing sequence of 0 is an enormous challenge for Leonardo. Therefore, Leonardo needs a wider sky and more opportunities. With a faint smile on his lips, Leonardo finally left Raphael Cemetery. I wonder if Gawain has been promoted to Sequence 7 yet. It's time to properly say goodbye to those guys who never bothered to send me flowers. Leonardo thought to himself, then boarded a horse-drawn carriage and eventually returned to his townhouse on Daffodil Street. The golden sycamore tree has gone, to Elizabeth's house. It was late at night, and in her dream, Elizabeth was sitting in class studying, but her thoughts had wandered far away, imagining one exciting adventure after another in the world of Beyonder. Snap! Suddenly, a piece of chalk hit her on the forehead. Elizabeth winced in pain, raised her eyes, looked at the black and white figure on the podium, and then at her teacher. Her pupils suddenly contracted. "Teacher Leonardo!" Elizabeth called out in surprise. On the stage, the blonde figure who had once taught him about occultism and given him the potion formula, making him a true Beyonder, reappeared. However, despite her surprise, Elizabeth still found the content somewhat dry. Leonardo wasn't talking about occultism, but rather mechanics, astronomy, mathematics, and so on. She saw Leonardo suddenly smile at her. "Study hard, both in and out of class. When you need a promotion, we'll meet again." The dream vanished like a bubble, and Elizabeth awoke with a start, gazing out the window at the moonlight over Crimson. Connor House, Howard Street. Leonardo's house has now been converted into the headquarters of the Charity Foundation. Drake sealed off the second floor, and he only rested on the first floor, where he processed various charitable grant applications during the day. Next, Drake saw off a worker whose left hand was now disabled due to improper operation. With a blank expression, he stamped the document and, without looking up, asked, "Name, Leonardo Mayor Connor." Drake suddenly looked up. His gaze met a pair of deep blue eyes. The owner of the eyes tapped and said, "Don't forget to be your hunter. 108 come home often." Drake's dream shattered. When he woke up, he was not sitting at his desk processing applications, nor was Leonardo Mayor Connor in sight. Mayor Connor. Drake muttered to himself. Wasn't it a dream last time? He really didn't die. Inside a house on the outskirts of the Northern District. Gao Wen was in his yard, instructing the trainee inspectors in combat. He suddenly noticed that one of his students had changed his appearance without him noticing. The police officer's black buzz cut was replaced with blonde curly hair. Mayor Connor. Gawain was equally surprised, then recalled his encounter with Mayor Connor in his dream. "I've been promoted to Sequence 7, and now I'm an interrogator." Leonardo smiled knowingly, and at the same time, Gawain's dream changed. He was no longer in the courtyard of his own home, but in a dark, enclosed room. Before him stood one prisoner after another. At that moment, Leonardo, dressed in the uniform of a high-ranking inspector, walked in. He gestured toward the bound prisoners. "You need to interrogate these guys, using your Beyonder abilities. In fact, the name of a potion itself contains a whole set of rules that help us master the potion and avoid negative effects. When we follow these rules to handle things, it seems that we become people of the corresponding profession. Similarly, these rules are implicit, no one tells you directly. You can only summarize them little by little from the relevant professions and then revise them based on different feedback. For example, if an inspector is also a sheriff, his potion digestion speed will be faster, and the corresponding chance of him going out of control will be reduced." Leonardo is planning to use dreams to help Gawain fully understand the acting method. "So, you have to become a real interrogator," Leonardo added silently to himself. Upon hearing this, Gao Wen nodded in understanding, then looked at the prisoners who were tightly bound in front of him. Then, an invisible lightning bolt suddenly shot out from his eyes. This is Interrogator's beyond ability, psychic piercing. The prisoner who was lucky enough to be chosen by Gawain collapsed to the ground in agony. I'll tell you everything," the prisoner screamed in agony, and at the same time, Leonardo manipulated Gawain's dream, simulating the feeling of the potion being digested. "That should be about right? Theory plus practice. If Gao Wen still can't grasp the existence of the acting method, then I'll have to find another way." Leonardo thought to himself, and silently left Gawain's dream. He returned to the real world, back to his rented townhouse. Knock knock knock. The door was suddenly knocked on. Leonardo stepped forward, only to be met with Dunn Smith, who was wearing a knee-length trench coat. Leonardo still looks like James at this point. "Hello, Senior Inspector, what can I do for you?" Dunn didn't answer Leonardo's question, but instead scanned his room, asking a question in return. "You killed Mayor Connor, didn't you?" His voice was deep, yet carried an imposing seriousness. Leonardo's heart tightened instantly. If Dunn Smith really was here for revenge, he had never made any preparations against him. Since Zhangwil has already left Tingen, I don't need to keep using the identity of James anymore. Leonardo thought to himself, and the ring on his finger changed color. He simulated the faceless ability and returned to his original appearance. "Captain Dunn, calm down." Leonardo spoke up to remind him, taking 2 steps back. After that, Dunn remained silent. He wasn't surprised, but a smile appeared on his lips. Dunn Smith chuckled and walked into the room quite naturally, sitting on the bed. "Mayor Connor, you really are alive. Is this a blessing for me?" Leonardo muttered to himself. He had wanted to find something to help him find Dunn, but he realized that he was completely unprepared. Leonardo sat down as well, looking at Dunn Smith and waiting for him to ask a question. In his view, Dunn Smith must have had many questions at this moment. He must want to know why he didn't die, and why he had to hide his identity. However, Dunn remained silent. After a long while, Dunn stood up and bowed deeply to Leonardo. "Thank you, Mayor Connor. I know you saved my error, otherwise Megos would have dealt a devastating blow to Tingen City." Leonardo paused for a moment, then smiled and asked, "Captain Dunn, how did you guess I was here?" Outside the window, the cool moonlight of crimson shone down, illuminating Dunn Smith's black trench coat. "You visited your own tombstone, I followed you. Is it really that simple?" Leonardo suppressed a twitch at the corner of his mouth and continued to press. "And what about Megos? What happened to her afterwards?" "They were taken away by the sanctuary." Dunn paused suddenly, as if recalling something sorrowful. However, Klein still sacrificed himself. "Why?" Leonardo asked, feigning sadness. Dunn let out a long sigh. "After you took Saint Selena's ashes from my hands and returned them to Channy's gate, Megos's condition improved significantly. Just when we all thought everything would be alright." Dunn choked back tears. "It was in Zhangwil, it was 008. He manipulated Klein, causing Klein to inexplicably activate spirit vision, directly staring at the evil god inside Megus's stomach, ultimately leading to its corruption and loss of control." After listening, Leonardo couldn't help but feel a sense of emotion. "Thank goodness Ince Zhangwil didn't chase after me to kill me. I guess he's busy with his promotion and doesn't have time for me. I'm still too stubborn." At the same time, he comforted Dunn Smith in his heart. All right, Captain Dunn, Klein won't die. He's the future, foal, the one who'll ascend to Saphira Castle, in the future. If I live to see that day, I will definitely bring Klein back to see you." Leonardo suddenly remembered a line from a song on Earth. "Visit your home often." After saying all this, Leonardo lowered his head and pretended to be sad. Immediately, he heard Dunn Smith ask, "By the way, Mayor Connor, what was that evil eyeball you gave me back then?" After hearing this, Leonardo considered it for a moment and finally decided to tell the truth. "That's old Neil's beyond characteristic. I tried to stop him, but I failed. Old Neil committed suicide. In Since Zhangwil's plan, old Neil will lose control while trying to resurrect his fiancée. And you will, as usual, take old Neil's Beander characteristic, but Captain Dunn, you should understand that this will deepen your contamination. It is precisely because you were corrupted that you made the wrong decision, taking out Saint Selena's ashes and enraging the evil god's offspring inside Megus's belly." Dunn nodded without refuting. In front of Leonardo, he pulled that eerie, black and white eyeball from his trenchcoat pocket. Squeak. Dunn Smith popped old Neil's beyond characteristic into his mouth and swallowed it. Leonardo felt a chill run down his spine as he watched this scene. 109 The generous Mr. Tower. "Captain Dunn, you could have done this without me," Leonardo said, trying to keep his expression from contorting, and quickly changed the subject. "So, Captain Dunn, what are your plans for the future?" Dunn didn't think, it seemed he already had the answer ready. "I will stay in Tingen and protect this place. Except for Leonard, everyone else has chosen to stay here." "Leonard? Yes, he's joining the Red Gloves. Monday arrived again, and Leonardo remained in Tingen City, not in a hurry to leave. At 3 p.m., Leonardo sat in his apartment, planning to attend the tarot gathering before heading to Backland. Gawain seemed to have grasped the acting method. Leonardo discovered that Gawain was no longer confined to instructing combat, but had become a true inspector responsible for interrogating prisoners. Of course, he also secretly found an opportunity to observe Gawain using his Beander ability on prisoners and successfully simulated psychic piercing. He has now taught 2 mid-sequences. Beander understands the acting method. One is Dunsmith of the sleepless pathway, and the other is Gawain of the arbiter pathway. Elizabeth and Drake also need to be prepared next. However, since he couldn't often return to Tingen to observe their promotions, Leonardo planned to first promote them to Sequence 7 and then recruit a messenger for himself. His requirements weren't high, he just needed someone to deliver messages and contact Elizabeth and Drake. He didn't need anyone to assist him in combat. Therefore, Leonardo felt that his success rate would be much higher once he was promoted to Sequence 7. In just 2 weeks, Leonardo believed that the Hanged Man Alger had prepared the beyond ingredient he needed for his promotion. Amidst a jumble of thoughts, a gray fog enveloped his vision. When his vision cleared again, Leonardo had already been pulled into above the gray fog by the Fool Klein. "Long time no see, Mr. Fool." Audrey was still the first to stand up and greet everyone. Tarot Club has been around for almost 3 months now, but she is still the only female member. "Good afternoon, Mr. Tower." Justice Audrey greeted everyone in the same way as before. First, the Fool, then, Tower, followed by, the Hanged Man, and, Little Son. Quote, after a brief exchange of greetings, Tower, Leonardo, Justice Audrey, and the Hanged Man Alger all materialized the diary of Emperor Russell, while, Little Son, found the Legend of the Ancient Gods, for Klein. Leonardo sat to the side and watched the Fool Klein browse through the files submitted by everyone, as usual, and felt relieved. At the same time, he also felt sorry for Klein, thinking that the other must be terrified right now. 008. After all, judging from Dunn's description, in Zhangwil at that time, in order to kill Klein, completely disregarded whether the story he wrote was logical or not. In short, he laid his cards on the table and stopped acting. Immediately, he turned his gaze to the Hanged Man Alger beside him. Unfortunately, Leonardo isn't a spectator, so he can't discern the other person's true thoughts from their body language. However, the Hanged Man Alger appears relaxed, which gives Leonardo more confidence in his beyond ingredient. Looking at Little Son, Derek on the other side, his body language clearly shows excitement, an excitement that even Beander, who isn't spectator, could observe. Leonardo began to consider it. After all, at the last gathering, he had made 4 requests for beyond ingredients at once, one for the main material of detective, and another for the main material of interrogator. The main ingredient for interrogator was naturally prepared for Gawain, but he had already successfully advanced to Sequence 7 in the past 2 weeks through his own abilities and did not need any more potions. If there are any redundant ingredients in Beander, I'm fine with taking them all. After all, Little Son is only Sequence 9. If he wants the Sequence 8 formula, it's painless for me. What Hanged Man wants is a new prophecy. Well, that would be painless for me to obtain, so it's more worthwhile to exchange it for real gold pounds. Leonardo quickly made plans for the trade and gradually gained confidence. Justice Audrey had seen everything he had just done. Mr. Tower actually observed Hanged Man and Little Son. Is he looking forward to the beyond ingredient request from last time? But judging from Hanged Man's relaxed demeanor and Little Son's excitement, they must both have already prepared the Beander ingredient that Mr. Tower needs, right? However, Little Son's excitement is quite obvious. Even if I don't maintain spectator mode, it's easy to see that he's very excited. Judging from this, Mr. Tower is going to have a great day. I wonder if he can come up with the Sequence 8 and Sequence 7 formulas for Little Son. Leonardo noticed Justice Audrey's observation, so he met her gaze and glanced at her. Audrey's thoughts were interrupted by this sudden gaze. She looked away, silently reminding herself. Audrey, how can you be so rude? How can you keep staring at a real, powerful person who can make accurate prophecies? No, that's not right. Even if he's not a strong person, but just an ordinary person, he shouldn't be so impolite. Audrey stuck out her tongue inwardly, and at the same time, the Fool Klein banged on the bronze table. The transaction has officially begun. The first to speak was Little Son, Derek, whose excitement overflowed onto his body surface. Mr. Tower, I have obtained the beyond ingredient you mentioned last time. In the past 2 weeks, I have obtained the liver of 6-armed Naga, the horn of the shimmering black serpent, and the dust of the spirit of the lake. Leonardo turned around, looked at Little Son, Derek, and nodded slightly in response. Little Son's efficiency has exceeded my expectations. These are all the best ingredients for sequence 7. Leonardo silently praised, then replied. You did a great job. If you need, Bard, Pathway, sequence 8 and sequence 7. As for the potion formula, I can give it to you right now. Little son, Derek nodded emphatically, then paused before adding. Mr. Tower. He hesitated, clearly. Just the recipe for sequence 8 is enough, my contribution is far from enough for the recipe for sequence 7. Quote. Justice Audrey chuckled to himself. Little son, is really honest and innocent. Even though she really wanted the sequence 7 formula, did she still have to give it up? Immediately, Justice Audrey turned his gaze to Leonardo, only to hear the other man casually remark. It doesn't matter. I can give you the recipe for sequence 7. Quote. Well, consider it a favor you owe me, just like, Hanged Man, did back then. The time limit is still 1 month. If I don't contact you for a commission within this month, then consider it a gift from me. Justice Audrey silently praised him in his heart. Mr. Tower is really generous. 110 A new prophecy. If this weren't the tarot gathering, but a clandestine gathering in the real world, Mr. Tower would probably have been robbed the moment he stepped out of the great door. Pa, how could you make fun of such a generous Mr. Tower? Justice Audrey snapped out of her reverie and recalled her telepathos recipe. Meanwhile, little son, Derek was caught between shock and delight, but realizing he was currently in the mysterious tarot gathering, he didn't show it outwardly. Instead, he silently thanked Mr. Tower for his generosity and praised Mr. the Fool for bringing him into the tarot club. Thank you, Mr. Tower. I will do my best to fulfill your request. Leonardo responded with a smile. Don't worry about, little son. I don't have any needs lately, so you don't need to keep it in mind. After speaking, Leonardo looked at the Fool Klein and, upon receiving a response, materialized the sequence 7 and sequence 8 formulas of the Bard Pathway from his mind and handed them to Little Son. Little Son suppressed her excitement and focused all her attention on the recipe. At this moment, Leonardo noticed that the Hanged Man seemed a little stunned. Over the past 2 weeks, the Hanged Man Alger has collected all 4 beyond ingredients for Leonardo, but now, Little Son has beaten him to it and has obtained 3 of them. The only unique feature of the Hanged Man right now is Hunter Fox's ear, but such a beyond ingredient is not valuable enough to exchange for a prophecy. The Hanged Man Alger sighed silently in his heart, and then heard Leonardo ask him a question. Mr. Hanged Man, have you gained anything during this time? You don't need to worry about duplicate materials, haha, in fact, I have a great need for them, as you can see. Anyway, he could sell it for money. Leonardo thought, glancing at the Hanged Man Alger. Upon hearing this, the Hanged Man Alger's mood immediately improved, and he became visibly excited. Thank you for your generosity, he said, I hope to receive your next prophecy in return. As soon as he finished speaking, the Hanged Man Alger's gaze swept over Justice Audrey and, Little Son, Derek. Finally, he looked up at the Fool Klein, the lead singer. Mr. Fool, I request to speak with you privately. As expected of the former political commissar Alger, Leonardo silently admired the other party's experience and shrewdness. Although Leonardo knew that the Hanged Man Alger certainly didn't want the prophecy he had obtained to be heard by others without any effort, he originally planned to write it down, just like the potion formula, and provide it to the other party through a tangible means. Justice Audrey inwardly marveled at the Hanged Man Alger's seasoned experience and expressed considerable curiosity about Leonardo's next prophecy. Little Son was also a little curious, but he knew that he and the others at the party were not in the same world, or were far apart, and he did not think that Mr. Tower's prophecy would be of much help to him. In comparison, potion formula is more practical. Little Son, Derek focused his attention back on the 2 potion formulas he had received, and tried his best to memorize their contents so that he wouldn't be unable to get promoted after leaving tarot gathering due to loss. By then, Little Son, Derek wouldn't ask Mr. Tower for a new copy. The Fool Klein hesitated for a moment, then used the gray mist to completely envelop Leonardo and Alger, blocking the view and sound of others except himself. Seeing the Fool Klein nod, Leonardo then spoke. Hanged Man, if I'm not mistaken, you must often sail the seas, right? And you and your sailors must worship the sea god to some extent. Yes, that's right. Alger sat up straight and listened attentively. Poseidon, Cavatua will also fall soon. Alger was stunned. He felt as if a dark cloud had drifted over his head and was bombarding his brain. Cavatua, the god of the sea. This is a being on the level of a god. He had expected Mr. Tower to give another prophecy, something like the fall of the pirate admirals or a change in the maritime situation, but he never expected this. Mr. Tower actually foresaw the fall of a god. Alger suddenly began to tremble uncontrollably. He suddenly realized that his previous judgment that Mr. Tower was merely a demigod of Sequence 4 was a mistake, a blasphemy. If Tower could truly foresee the fall of a god, then it means that he was at least an angel. Based on previous deductions, the hanged man Alger believes that Tower is a blessed entity that existed hundreds of years ago in the Fool, therefore, Mr. Tower is an angel under the Fool. Alger was so shocked that he couldn't calm down for a long time. The fool Klein was also shocked by Leonardo's prophecy, but Clown granted him ultimate control over his body, allowing Klein to remain calm and not show any shock. Phew, Leonardo's message this time is really explosive, Klein exclaimed, clearing away the gray fog. Leonardo and Alger reappeared in everyone's sight. Justice Audrey was the first to begin thinking and observing. Hanged Man was shocked, even more so than when he heard the news of Kilango's death. She recalled the look of shock on the hanged man Alger's face when Tower, Leonardo uttered his first prophecy. I'm really curious. The thought had barely formed in her mind when Audrey couldn't maintain her composure and, filled with curiosity, asked aloud. Mr. Tower, I would also like to hear your prediction. What do you need? If it is within my power. Upon hearing Justice's question, the hanged man realized that the fool had somehow removed the fog's barrier and understood his lapse in composure. The hanged man Alger took deep breaths repeatedly, and it took him a long time to calm his emotions and regain his composure. The hanged man Alger glanced at Justice Audrey and thought that if the other party could offer sufficient conditions, then the other party should also know about this prophecy, and he had no right to stop it. Justice Audrey looked expectantly at Tower, Leonardo, hoping he would give a prophecy. However, Leonardo shook his head and rejected Justice Audrey. No, Miss Justice, this prophecy has almost no effect on you. You don't have to offer a precious reward for a prophecy that is of little importance to you. Hearing this, Justice Audrey looked away with slight disappointment, then seemed to remember something, raised his head again, and asked the question again. Mr. Tower, may I exchange a prophecy with you that will be related to me? I think you can roughly guess what the three of us are really like, right? Justice Audrey instinctively removed the fool Klein. Leonardo responded after only a moment's thought. If one day I receive a prediction that meets your requirements, I will naturally propose a deal. Leonardo didn't want to show off too much at this moment. After all, this was above the gray fog, the fool Klein's home ground. Although he knew Klein wouldn't mind and really wanted the members to help Tarot Club thrive, Leonardo still didn't want to reveal too much of his own value. Anyway, there will be many more opportunities in the future. If I reveal everything at once, how can I maintain my persona if there are no more predictions to make in the future? Considering the long-term future, Leonardo ultimately rejected Justice Audrey, averting his gaze and refusing to meet her expectant eyes. 111 Promotion to Sequence 7. At the end of the Tarot Club, the Fool Klein presented the Beyond Characteristic Conservation Law in similar sequences. After receiving information such as the Beyonder Characteristic Conservation Law, Justice Audrey asked the Fool Klein if it was possible to recruit people into the society. After a brief exchange, the Tarot Club event officially ended, and Leonardo was able to return to the real world. Upon returning to the real world, Leonardo obtained the Beyond ingredient for Sequence 7 from the Fool Klein. Apart from the main ingredients, Leonardo had already prepared all the auxiliary materials during this time. He couldn't wait to find the alchemy cauldron and prepare to advance to Sequence 7. Sizzle. Amidst the teeth-grinding sound, a wisp of pale white mist suddenly rose up, only to be forcibly pulled back into the iron pot by an invisible force. Once everything had calmed down, Leonardo quickly poured out the liquid, not leaving a single drop, into a clear glass bottle that had been prepared beforehand. The liquid was quite peculiar, resembling interwoven copper wires, and its surface was pale red. This is the detective potion. Leonardo held a gold coin between his left thumb and forefinger, flicked it upwards with a clatter, and caught it with his open palm. He was using divination to confirm whether his concoction of the magic potion had been successful. Snap! The gold coin falls with the portrait facing upwards, indicating approval. After doing all this, Leonardo raised his head and drank the potion in the iron pot in one gulp. The icy potion traveled down my throat, with countless bubbles bursting at any moment. Leonardo was enjoying the thrill when a flood of knowledge rushed into his mind, including occultism and ritual magic from various fields. At the same time, he could clearly feel his strength increasing, his body becoming lighter, and he gaining a basic understanding of how to use various weapons. As a deluge of information flooded his mind, Leonardo felt as if his brain was stretched to its limit, as if it were about to explode at any moment. He quickly suppressed his thoughts, focused his attention, sketched a ball of light in his mind, and entered a meditative state to combat the pain that was enough to make him roll on the ground. After an unknown amount of time, the pain gradually disappeared, replaced by a numb and itchy feeling all over the body, especially in the arms. Leonardo pulled back his sleeve and was shocked to see that one of his arms was deeply wrinkled, like that of a centenarian, while the other arm had lost its color and become transparent, revealing the blood vessels, muscles, and veins inside. Leonardo sat back on the bed. It was already evening, and golden sunlight streamed through the bay window, illuminating his golden hair. Leonardo continued meditating, battling the lingering effects of the potion. He was not afraid of the changes in his body. After all, Sequence 7 was different from Sequence 8 and Sequence 9. It was a true improvement that was completely different from that of ordinary people. This enhancement will bring a certain increase in physical strength, even for those who are not skilled in melee combat pathways. Even those beyonders who aren't skilled in ritual magic or other pathways will have much clearer minds than the average person, with significant improvements in both memory and observation skills. Sequence 7 is also the door threshold to entering the mid-sequence. Leonardo did not underestimate the effects of the potion and continued to concentrate and meditate. Leonardo slowly opened his eyes only when the moonlight from crimson replaced it and streamed into the room through the bay window. At the same time, the strange thing on his arm disappeared and he returned to his original appearance. Only then did Leonardo finally have the mind to organize the various kinds of knowledge and abilities in his mind. Reader Pathways Sequence 7 inches Detective is equivalent to Detective and comes with effects such as increased action points, weapon proficiency, combat mastery, reasoning mastery, and ritual magic mastery. Its core ability is Reconstruction. All detectives can use Beyander to analyze and reconstruct events that have occurred within a certain area. This also allowed Leonardo to prepare his next plan. Since the potion can also be called detective, if Leonardo could become a private detective under an assumed name like Klein, it would make his impersonation easier and allow him to advance in rank sooner. With a slightly excited heart, Leonardo quickly set up an altar and candles, intending to recruit a messenger for himself. It has to be said that having a messenger makes things much easier for Beyonders in many ways. Leonardo quickly prepared the ritual to summon the creatures of Spirit World, following the instructions in the setting collection, as the surroundings were filled with the psychedelic scents of herbs and essential oils. When summoning a creature from the Spirit World, the first sentence must include descriptions such as, wandering in the illusion, or, roaming in the upper realm. Only in this way can it be directed to the Spirit World. The last part of the sentence must clearly state whether the creature to be summoned is a spirit or a creature with some flesh and blood. The second and third sentences are more precise descriptions of the target, but due to format limitations, more language cannot be used to determine this. Therefore, the person performing the ritual cannot predict or divine in advance what will be summoned. In this situation, using spells that have been verified by others will be much less risky. Therefore, Leonardo didn't think much about it and planned to directly copy the spell Klein used when recruiting messengers in the original book. Lighting the candle that symbolized himself, Leonardo stepped back and spoke in the style of the ancient Hermes. I summon in my own name. A spirit that wanders in illusion, a friendly creature that can be commanded, a unique being willing to be my messenger. Inside the wall of spirituality, a sudden gust of wind caused Leonardo's golden hair to fly wildly in disarray. The candlelight flickered, swelling to the size of a human head, so pale it seemed to have lost its warmth. Then, the candle flame continued to expand until it was finally broken through like a thin film. Leonardo looked up and, amidst the chaotic sound of the wind, made out the appearance of the creature, or rather, the object. In Leonardo's spirit vision, a pitch-black, ink-like shadow spreads to his feet, constantly changing shape, and finally transforms into an empty suit of armor. Its breastplate, helmet, arm armor, and even leg guards were all jet black, as dark as night. Then, in Leonardo's gaze, the armor raised its arm, and an invisible longsword, as black as ink, materialized. That's impressive. Leonardo's eyes lit up immediately. He felt that his messenger was just like the darkness night in those fantasy epic masterpieces. However, the good times didn't last long. The armor fell to the ground without making a sound, disappearing into the dark shadow. So this shadow is the real body, and that imposing appearance just now was only a brief demonstration for me, and it couldn't even last long, right? Leonardo shook his head and smiled helplessly. He wasn't affected by this. After all, he had only ever recruited a messenger to deliver messages, not a powerful being to assist him in battle. So he lowered his head and looked at the strange shadow on the ground. Would you like to be my messenger? 112 The messenger. The shadow kept shrinking and changing, eventually forming various languages such as Loan, Intis, and even ancient Hermes. This guy knows quite a few words. Leonardo remarked, his gaze fixed on some words and phrases he couldn't understand. Finally, through the universal language emanating from that dark shadow, he learned the other party's true intentions. Willing. Leonardo nodded, but couldn't help feeling worried. If the spirit world creature wanted something evil like the blood of its master, Leonardo had no choice but to give up recruiting and continue interviewing other people. He continued, asking, "What do you need in return?" The dark shape began to writhe again, and the words reappeared. Knowledge. No matter what kind of knowledge it is. I want them all. Perhaps recognizing Leonardo's familiarity with the Loan language, the shadowy figure only condensed Loan language this time. This guy is perfect for me. As a reader, and someone who also has access to setting collection, my knowledge is not lacking. I could even receive a payment from the recipient, just like Klein did. Leonardo nodded, his thoughts wandering uncontrollably. Can you traverse the spirit world at a relatively fast speed? How are your survival skills? He continued to ask. The shadowy figure changed the text again. Well enough. Leonardo made a decision quickly without further hesitation. Then let's sign the contract. He picked up a pen and parchment and began writing the contract swiftly in the ancient Hermetic script, a script capable of manipulating the forces of nature. The format and terms are concise and powerful, which is not difficult for Leonardo, a time traveler. It also includes provisions that the messenger must not peek at the letter, discard the letter, or endanger the contractor's life. Of course, if the contractor's letter involves the messenger, the contractor must inform the messenger in advance. In addition to these provisions, Leonardo added a clause in which knowledge in various fields could be provided as a reward, and like Klein, he explicitly stated that this could be undertaken by either the party to the contract or the other party to the letter. To ensure the validity of the contract, the final part is the name of the deity of the domain. This is a necromancer's pact, which normally requires the name of death, but since this death has been gone for a long time and no longer responds, Leonardo decided to use the description of a high-ranking figure in the necromancer realm or the underworld itself instead, which is also mentioned in the setting collection. Leonardo undoubtedly chose the underworld. The final destination of all death lies deep within the hell of spirit world, a testament to the demise of all things, a realm that belongs solely to death. After these 4 lines of description, the ancient Hermetic script on the brown parchment ignited one after another with a ghastly green flame, casting a gloomy and eerie light all around. After finishing the main text, Leonardo signed his name at the end. Leonardo Mayor Connor. The messenger's current purpose is mainly to allow Leonardo to leave Tingen and go to Backland so that he can contact Elizabeth and Drake, so naturally his real name should be used. Then, the parchment carrying the pen flew up and landed on the floor, landing on the shadows. The dark figure stretched out a black human arm, took the pen, and signed its name at the end. Archer Weiss. The ghastly green flames quickly merged into one, turning the parchment to ashes, and the pen wrapped in the parchment clattered to the ground. Leonardo didn't rush to end the summoning. He bent down to pick up his pen and took out 2 envelopes, writing down the details of the summoning ritual and the words in them, ready to thoroughly test the messenger's workability. After writing Elizabeth and Drake's current addresses on the envelope, Leonardo handed it to Archer, indicating that the letter could now be delivered. After receiving Leonardo's 2 letters, Archer did not disappear as Leonardo had expected, but remained on the floor in the same spot. Is he waiting for me to share this knowledge with him? Leonardo rubbed his temples, thinking to himself, unfortunately, the advanced knowledge from the 21st century is not something you can currently access. Leonardo, looking at Archer's shadowy figure clinging to the floor, added without changing his expression. The recipient will pay you in return. As soon as he finished speaking, Leonardo ended the summoning with his own will, and the shadow, Archer quickly shrank and disappeared, returning the floor to its original state. Golden Sycamore District, Elizabeth's home. It was late at night, but Elizabeth was still awake. She sat at her desk in her room with the gas lamp on, rapidly browsing through book after book. Ever since Leonardo entered her dream, she has followed his instructions diligently, spending a great deal of time each day studying and digesting the knowledge taught in class. In fact, after becoming a savant, Elizabeth clearly felt that her interest in knowledge was growing stronger. Suddenly, she noticed that her gas light was flickering almost imperceptibly. Moonlight streamed through the window onto the desk in crimson, casting dappled shadows. Elizabeth suddenly noticed that her red oak desk had somehow become shrouded in shadow. She was a little nervous, and also a little doubtful. Even if her shadow blocks the light in the room, it shouldn't make the whole table pitch black, right? Elizabeth suddenly thought of all sorts of legends, and remembered the dangerous and eerie Beander world that Leonardo had described to her, and she immediately became apprehensive. To her astonishment, a dark human arm slowly emerged from the shadows. A letter. Elizabeth stared warily at the black arm, noticing the letter clutched tightly in its hand. Elizabeth and the shadow, Archer remained locked in a stalemate for an unknown period of time until the shadow, Archer threw the letter directly at Elizabeth's feet, at which point she finally reacted. Is this for me? Elizabeth suddenly realized, and immediately opened the letter and quickly began to read it. The letter mainly tells Leonardo how to summon his messenger and reminds Elizabeth that she needs to pay a piece of knowledge as payment for the messenger. After reading the letter, Elizabeth felt relieved, and her tension was quickly dispelled by a sense of novelty. She quickly recalled the mechanical dynamics she had learned in class and from books that day and began explaining it to Black Shadow, Archer. After the explanation, she saw the shadows rapidly changing on her desk. Thanks. Archer, the shadow, vanished quickly to deliver the next letter. Elizabeth was still immersed in the novelty brought by the messenger. She had no interest in studying at the moment and instead kept playing with the envelope that Leonardo had sent. Professor Leonardo's messenger is very polite, just like his cane. Elizabeth rolled her eyes. Speaking of which, it's been a long time since I've seen Professor Leonardo's cane. She really wanted to reply to Leonard, but Leonard clearly stated in his letter that she should not summon the messenger unless absolutely necessary, unless it was for a promotion issue. 15 Howard Street, Connor House, Leonardo, Charity Foundation. Drake was exhausted as he processed one grant application after another, while the rabbit he had hunted that day lay on the kitchen table, yet to be prepared as food. I'll be promoted soon, right? But how can I contact Mr. Leonardo? Drake, puzzled, stood up, stretched, and headed to the kitchen, ready to turn his day's catch into a sumptuous dinner. As he picked up the knife and skillfully cleaned the rabbit, the table suddenly turned pitch black. In the instant Drake hesitated, an arm reached out from the shadow on the table, dragging the letter in front of him and filling Drake's entire field of vision. Drake opened the envelope somewhat absent-mindedly and quickly scanned it. He quickly memorized Leonardo's instructions and descriptions, and then began to think about what knowledge he should impart. After a moment's thought, Drake shared some of his hunting experiences with Shadow, Archer. 113 Chapter 113 Backland. Chapter 113 Backland. On the steam train to Backland, Leonardo sat in an empty seat, pondering what was to come while browsing new information in the setting collection. He now possesses all 22 pathways with sequence 7 and below of potion formula, and the new knowledge introduced in the setting collection has become even more complex after this promotion. The most important part is how to distinguish between the beyond ingredient and the mystical item. The setting collection has a very detailed description of the beyond ingredient. Leonardo firmly believes that even though he only has sequence 7, it wouldn't be difficult for him to hold a beyond party. Aside from the complex and varied beyond ingredients and mystical items, what excites Leonardo the most is the appearance of all 22 pathways and the underlying principles of beyond abilities below sequence 7. Once I fully understand these principles, it means I can easily simulate all Beyonder abilities with sequence 7 or lower for all pathways. Leonardo thought with a hint of delight. This is a huge improvement for him. Now he has 2081, which allows him to use the simulation ability in advance, and the principles of setting collection are enough for him to analyze all kinds of Beyonder abilities. This is a great asset in the treacherous Backland. It took Leonardo a long time to fully memorize and digest this new knowledge. At the same time, Leonardo has already planned its own development path. First, go find Mr. Isengard Stanton and see if he has been promoted to Polymath at sequence 6. After all, without the notary ability, it will be difficult for him to maintain the normal operation of the secret gatherings. If he succeeds in his promotion, I can inquire with Mr. Isengard about the whereabouts and methods for finding the materials needed for sequence 6. Leonardo recalls reader pathway. I'm having a headache with sequence 6, a polymath formula. For Leonardo, the biggest challenge in advancing to sequence 6 was not the main materials but the auxiliary materials. He also remembered the instructions on setting collection. 150 milliliters of blood from a blood-tailed red fox, a pair of eyes from a deep-sea naga, proof of having read 1,000 books and passed the test, and new knowledge discovered from ruins, ancient tombs, foreign libraries, etc. For Leonardo, who is backed by Tarot Club, obtaining the Beyonder ingredient is not difficult, the most difficult items are the latter two. Therefore, seeking advice from Isengard Stanton is essential. After all, this is Leonardo's only reader connection. Of course, it would be much easier if he could become Mr. Isengard's assistant directly. After his promotion, he wouldn't need to continue playing the role of detective, but he would definitely not be willing to give up the military resources he has accumulated over the years. Leonardo thought to himself again. Mr. Isengard must be very troubled right now, right? If he could have an assistant to help him with the case, I believe Mr. Isengard would be very willing. Ah! The sound of the steam whistle echoed in every corner of the platform as the enormous, monster-like steam locomotive, pulling more than 20 carriages, slowly came to a stop. Wearing a suit vest over a shirt, Leonardo carried a suitcase and stepped steadily onto the ground of Backland, the capital of the Kingdom of Loan. Stepping out of the station, Leonardo gazed into the distance and saw only a pale yellow mist everywhere, making visibility extremely poor. The gas lamps hanging on the platform had already been lit one by one, dispelling the gloom and darkness. No wonder it's Backland, Leonardo thought to himself. The setting for this city must be foggy London, right? Withdrawing his gaze, Leonardo picked up his suitcase and slowly walked out of the steam train station with the crowd. He flagged down a horse-drawn carriage and headed straight for Isengard Stanton's residence. As for where the other party lived, Leonardo spent a full 10 days finding out. He now has nearly 1,500 gold coins in savings. This amount of money would be enough for him to live a good life in Backland, but in the world of Beander, it probably wouldn't last more than a few transactions. I need to find a way to quickly convert all the extra beyond ingredients that Little Sun and Hanged Man gave me into cash. Leonardo thought as he stepped into the carriage. The carriage sped past the crowded streets, the gas lamps on either side casting a dim, yellowish glow. One after another, huge factory chimneys rose from the ground, and even through the hazy fog and countless streets, they could still be clearly seen through the train windows. Backland truly lives up to its reputation as the capital of the Kingdom of Loan and the Land of Hope, as its streets are more than twice as wide as those of Tingen City. Isengard Stanton's residence is in Sherwood Borough, a neighborhood nestled along the Tussock River, surrounded by small businesses and numerous homes. Leonardo jumped off the carriage and went to a 2-story detached house once the carriage had come to a complete stop. This is Isengard Stanton's residence, and also the source of Leonardo 2081. Leonardo had already used his faceless ability to disguise himself. He didn't want to expose himself in front of Isengard Stanton, so he put 2081 in his shirt pocket instead of carrying it in his hand. After walking through the courtyard, Leonardo knocked on the door of Isengard Stanton's house. Click. The door was slowly pulled open, and what came into view was not the assistant from last time, but Isengard Stanton with a round face. He looked Leonardo up and down, and while speaking, he tried to close the door. If you want to entrust me with a case, I'm sorry, I'm busy right now. Isengard's tone was indifferent, and Leonardo noticed that he had lost a few more strands of hair than he had during the last trade, 2081. Leonardo smiled and quickly reached out to stop the door from closing. Mr. Isengard Stanton, Leonardo began, I'm here to apply for the position of your assistant. Assistant. Isengard raised an eyebrow, but still made way for Leonardo to enter the house. I did not place any advertisements recruiting assistants. He didn't make tea for Leonardo, he simply watched Leonardo sit on the sofa, then slumped back in his armchair and put a pipe in his mouth. Leonardo had already prepared his explanation in response to Isengard's suspicions. He first chuckled and said, Mr. Isengard, your reputation in Backland doesn't need advertising to attract some newcomers to your private detectives, does it? Leonardo's statement is an undeniable fact. Throughout the Kingdom of Loan, the private detective industry has become quite a trend, and even in Tingen City, there are many private detectives. Private detectives from remote areas or small cities who want to make a name for themselves often travel to Backland alone. It is common knowledge that all private detectives sell their reputation and credibility. A newcomer to the industry often starts as an assistant to a senior local detective, gradually building their reputation step by step. Unfortunately, I don't need an assistant right now. 114 Chapter 114 An Official Request. Chapter 114, An Official Request. Mr. Isengard must be worried about advancing to Sequence 6 right now, right? It seems he hasn't succeeded yet, but I wonder what materials he's missing. Leonardo decided to go straight to the door and get to the point, ending the roundabout process. In fact, Mr. Isengard, if you would be willing to let me be your assistant, I can offer you some assistance. Isengard straightened up from the armchair and looked at Leonardo. What kind of help can a young and unknown private detective offer me? Leonardo raised his eyes and looked at Isengard's brow. I have some channels to obtain Beander ingredients. I wonder if you would be interested. If he agrees, I can ask the Hanged Man and Little Sun to help me find him. Leonardo thought, smiling, waiting for Isengard's response. Isengard's gaze suddenly turned wary. Throughout Backland, apart from the military, very few people knew that he was a Beander. His left hand unconsciously reached for the gun belt at his waist. You don't need to be nervous, Mr. Isengard. I have certain needs for becoming your assistant. However, I have no ill intentions towards you personally. Leonardo sat on the sofa, and his aura suddenly became sharp. If he were to actually clash with Isengard, and since both are detectives in sequence 7, and Leonardo has a score of 2081, Isengard would definitely not be a match for him. At the same time, Leonardo reached into his pocket and pinched 2081 between his fingertips. What do you need? Isengard asked suspiciously in a low voice. I hope to be able to participate in your Beander gatherings, Leonardo emphasized, stressing, Mr. Eye of Wisdom. As soon as he finished speaking, Isengard suddenly froze on the spot. If the secret that he was Beander was known only to a few military personnel, then his status as the Eye of Wisdom was virtually unknown to anyone. While Isengard was still in shock, Leonardo spoke again. I know you're looking for a promotion. If you need any materials, I can help you find them. Leonardo's voice was calm, and he had a smile on his face, but in Isengard's eyes, it was somewhat frightening. However, having weathered many storms, Isengard quickly regained his composure. This time, his gaze toward Leonardo no longer held the previous contempt but rather a certain wariness. Despite facing a well-investigated opponent, Isengard, as the detective, remained calm. It's obvious you've investigated me, though I don't know how you did it, but, he quickly added, I think you must be a highly capable private detective. I happen to have a case here, from the military. It involves a certain level of danger. Are you willing to accept it? The effect is quite successful, but I'm not some kind of highly capable private detective. I'm a transmigrator, and I've read the original book. Leonardo thought to himself, nodding at the same time. He stood up and extended his hand to Isengard in a friendly manner. Mr. Isengard, thank you for your trust. You can tell me what beyond ingredient you need, and I will use my own channels to find it for you. At the same time, I will also help you keep it a secret. As soon as he finished speaking, Leonardo withdrew his hand from his pocket. His eyes suddenly dimmed, and the faint, bright light disappeared. In the previous contact, Leonardo had been using his ability of psychological suggestion to gain Isengard's trust and achieve cooperation. Isengard did not respond, turned and went into the room, took out the case file, and spread it out on the table. Do you know Bakerland? Isengard instantly switched to detective mode and began discussing the case with Leonardo. That peace ambassador from the Intis Republic. That's right. Isengard exhaled a puff of smoke and continued his analysis. Actually, he's also a Beander, a sequence 6 feet conspirer, from the Hunter pathway. However, the official door suspected that he was plotting something in Loen, so they commissioned me to help them investigate. However, I've been so busy seeking a promotion that I haven't been able to get started yet. Using this commission as the criterion, if you can help me complete the investigation, I will agree to let you be my assistant. Also, you can participate in my Beander gatherings. Leonardo nodded slightly in response and quickly began his analysis. If you investigate Bakerland, you'll definitely run into Rosago. Leonardo immediately recalled the memory of almost being killed by Rosago when he was trying to simulate the faceless ability. He managed to escape last time by using the substitute wand, but now the substitute wand belongs to Justice Audrey. However, he is now sequence 7, and his combat and investigative abilities have both improved. Besides, I've already faced Ins Zangwil head-on, and Rosago is probably no match for him. Although that was mainly due to the words of filth, Leonardo quickly made a dangerous assessment in his mind. He believed that as long as he made more magic mirrors, he could use mirror substitution to escape in a crisis and thus evade capture. What troubled him most was the marionettist's ability to manipulate spirit body threads. If the timing of mirror substitution is not right, and Rosago turns it into a secret puppet, then there will be a big problem. But this is just an investigation, and Rosago's attention should be focused on the members of MI9 right now. If we're careful, Rosago shouldn't waste his time on me. Bakerland, belonging to sequence 6 inches conspirer, is relatively less dangerous. Hunter Pathway's abilities are not as difficult to deal with as marionettist. Having made his decision, Leonardo answered. No problem, but I need a little time. While he was pondering, Isengard had been observing Leonardo. Upon hearing that he was willing to accept the commission, he said with some relief. Don't worry, this commission comes from an official organization. Hey, the reward they offer isn't much, so you don't need to take any risks. Even if you fail to complete the commission, they won't do anything to you. If you are in danger, listen to me, run for your life. Isengard spoke with a touch of mischief, then explained the complete details of the mission to Leonardo. After the handover was finished, Isengard signaled to Leonardo that he could leave. However, Leonardo did not turn around and leave the door as he had expected. Isengard's gaze fell on his briefcase, and he chuckled awkwardly. Sorry, I almost forgot, you probably don't have a place to stay yet. I just fired my former assistant. His room is empty, so you can stay there for now. As he spoke, Isengard pointed to the guest rooms on the first floor. Leonardo bowed politely and said, "Thank you for your generosity, Mr. Isengard. You still haven't told me what beyond ingredient you need." Isengard shook his head. "No rush, we can talk about this after you finish your first commission." Leonardo didn't ask any further questions, picked up his suitcase, and prepared to go into the guest room to tidy up. Just as Leonardo unlocked the door and was about to step inside, he heard Isengard mutter something behind him. "Hee, you still haven't told me your name." Leonardo then realized this and understood that he had been somewhat impolite, so he stepped back and introduced himself. "Poirot Christie, you may call me Poirot, sir." Isengard nodded in response. "I hope we can have a pleasant collaboration in the future." He turned and walked up the stairs, but suddenly stopped, turned back, and added, "You look a lot like a guy the first used to know. However, he's a bit more direct than you, more rude." He approached door without explanation, wanting to make a deal with me, but shortly after the deal was completed, he was assassinated. Isengard sighed, shook his head, and walked up the stairs until he disappeared completely around the corner. Leonardo stood frozen in place, suppressing the twitching of his lips. Is my disguise really that bad? Does this mean I've been recognized? 115 Chapter 115 Infiltration. Chapter 115 Infiltration. Leonardo gathered his thoughts, no longer considering whether Isengard had recognized his true identity. He then began to analyze how to find evidence that Bakerland was plotting a conspiracy. Leonardo leaned back in the wooden chair, his mind racing through the plot of the original book. Ambassador Bakerland Jean Madden was commissioned by the fool Klein to assassinate Bakerland because the latter needed to protect himself. Justice Audrey accepted the commission and subsequently found Mr. A of the Aurora Order. Ultimately, Ambassador Bakerland was assassinated at the ball, and his soul was sent to graze. The whole incident began with Zerial. After Zerial's death, detective and his informant Ian Wright took the clues to the Hermos manuscript and was hunted down by Ambassador Bakerland's men. As long as we find Ian Wright and get the Hermos manuscript, this commission should be completed successfully. Leonardo quickly found a breakthrough, but new problems followed. With a population of over 5 million, finding someone skilled in disguise and escape within such a large population base is extremely difficult. Even if Leonardo were able to simulate Klein's seer ability to perform divination, he would most likely fail due to insufficient information. My own simulation would already reduce the effectiveness of Beander's abilities, not to mention I don't have the support of Grey Mist. There is another way. Leonardo recalled the plot of the original book. Klein once divined Ian's whereabouts to persuade Bakerland and others to give up their investigation in suspicion of him, and wrote it down and put it in his room. If someone breaks into his room to investigate, they can directly find out Ian Wright's whereabouts and relax surveillance on Klein. However, if I were to sneak into his current room, I might run into Master Rosago, who is also sneaking in. Leonardo hesitated. He didn't want to confront Rosago head-on right now. However, he still planned to use this as a starting point to find Ian Wright. If he could complete this task, it would increase Isengard's trust in him and facilitate his future promotion. Moreover, to play the role of detective, well, it is absolutely not enough to just make deductions without personally going to the scene to take risks. At worst, he could wait until Rosago got the information and left, and then he could infiltrate again. He can use the ability to simulate assassin, so infiltration won't be difficult. Besides, Leonardo's target is always Ian Wright's whereabouts, not Klein himself, so it won't arouse Clown's dangerous premonition. Leonardo arrived in Backland about a day or two later than Klein, so Klein should have already investigated Zerial by then. The whereabouts of the detective were discovered, and he was thus targeted by Ambassador Bakerland. Therefore, tonight is the time for Rosago to sneak into Klein's room to check on Ian's whereabouts. Having finalized his plan, Leonardo didn't delay and quickly got to work. He first hired a horse-drawn carriage and went to 15 Minsk Street. Minsk Street is also in Sherwood Borough, not far from Isengard Stanton's home. Leonardo arrived at his destination in about 10 minutes. It was already late at night. The hazy fog and dark clouds of Backland obscured the moonlight in crimson, and only the gas lamps on both sides of the street were lit, emitting a dim yellow glow. The lights in the row houses had long been turned off, but a few scattered figures could still be seen on the street. These people walked in silently, hunched over, and unsteady, appearing physically weak. Leonardo understood that these people were all homeless people without jobs, and every night they would try to find a place on the street that could provide some shelter for sleep. "Get up, you bastards! The streets and parks are not places for you to sleep." A roaring voice came from the street corner. Leonardo ignored the homeless people and the yelling night watchman, leaning against the gas lamp, his body sinking into the shadows. Having other people on the road actually gives Leonardo an advantage. If he were alone, Rosago could easily find him through the spirit-body threads. However, with these homeless people as cover, Rosago wouldn't particularly notice his presence. Leonardo pulled down his hat brim, his eyes fixed on the house Klein rented through the gap. Time ticked by, and Leonardo fought off sleepiness, waiting for his chance. He didn't know when Rosago would infiltrate, so the best outcome was to wait until sunrise, when everyone was most exhausted and Rosago was least likely to make a move. As drowsiness grew, the homeless wandering the streets continued to walk numbly. Whenever they found a slightly warm corner, the patrolling night police would immediately step forward, waving their batons or raising their revolvers to drive the homeless away. Leonardo silently observed all of this, occasionally glancing up at the living room window on the second floor of Klein as he applied Klag's oil. Klag's oil is used to refresh the mind and eliminate odors. Leonardo applied Klag's oil to his temples to keep himself awake. Leonardo only prepared to act when the first rays of dawn pierced the ink-black night sky and when he heard birdsong. The color of 2081 on his fingertips changed, and at the same time, Leonardo reached out and wiped his hand in front of him, instantly transforming his appearance. He transformed into Master Rosago, with black hair, blue eyes, a handsome face, and a light beard. Meanwhile, 2081 changed color again. Leonardo's simulation activates the assassin ability, altering the body to become as light as a feather. Using the exposed gas pipes, the user skillfully climbs to the second floor bay window. Immediately afterwards, Leonardo gently pushed open the window, jumped down, and made no sound. The room was dimly lit, the sun had not yet fully risen, and only a faint morning light shone into the room. At the same time, Leonardo's eyes were on the table, where he saw the note that had been turned face down. It says on it, "I don't know where Ian Wright is. I haven't seen him since I found Zerial's body. However, I learned through my own channels that Ian Wright had been at the telegraph office on White Rum Street." Leonardo stared intently at the note, memorizing its contents. Without putting the note back, he glanced back at Klein, and after confirming that the other was still fast asleep, he nimbly leapt onto the windowsill, closed the window, and then, like a feather, tumbled down from the second floor, landing lightly on the ground. White Rum Street Telegraph Office. He was still trying to figure out where Ian Wright was. After the investigation, Leonardo walked to a shady corner of Minsk Street, his fingers changing color again, reverting to the appearance of Poirot Christie, and hailed a horse-drawn carriage to return. Shortly after he left, Klein woke up with a start, the sheets behind him already soaked with cold sweat. Klein looked up at the misty sky outside the window, and at the papers being turned on the table. 116 Chapter 11 RCES Staking Out. Chapter 116 Three Forces Staking Out. Zerial Detective is a spy for the Fasak Empire. He deliberately selects people like Ian Wright, who are not easily detected, to cultivate as informants for espionage activities. Now that Zerial is dead, Ian Wright has successfully obtained the Hermos manuscript, and the reason he appeared on White Rum Street is to contact Zerial's superior. Leonardo quickly analyzed the current situation while taking a horse-drawn carriage towards the telegraph office on White Rum Street. He didn't choose to go back to sleep. After all, he now needed to play the role of a real detective. A true detective will never give up on any clue. The White Rum Street Telegraph Office is located at the intersection of Sherwood Borough and East Borough. It took Leonardo about 30 minutes to reach the location. Here, Leonardo randomly chose a restaurant, intending to replenish his energy while keeping watch. Whenever Ian wants to contact Zerial's superiors, he will appear here, and as a result, he will be tracked by Intis intelligence agents. A restaurant waiter approached, carrying a bag of coffee. Leonardo chose a window seat with the best view, and without looking up, directly instructed the waiter. "A cup of Southvale coffee, please." The waiter returned with a smile, not bothering to wonder why Leonardo kept staring out the window. Leonardo took the coffee, staring intently out the window while glancing around at his surroundings. Throughout the restaurant, most of the passengers looked solemn, and the atmosphere was tense and lifeless. Leonardo sneered inwardly. Hee hee, I bet most of the people here are Beyonders, probably all staking out Ian Wright. It's not hard to guess that in just one night yesterday, besides Rosago and Leonardo, MI9 also sent people to infiltrate Klein's house and find out Ian Wright's whereabouts. Therefore, the tense atmosphere in the restaurant now is not strange. Leonardo quickly memorized everyone's appearance, and was able to use his faceless ability to impersonate both sides later. Tonight, Intis's intelligence agents will find Ian Wright in Red Brick Alley in East Borough, and MI9 will also appear to engage in a firefight with the Intis agents. For most of the day, Leonardo played the role of detective very seriously, never leaving his post, and even had lunch in the restaurant. Most of the people in the restaurant were in the same situation as him, and did not leave their posts. At that moment, a familiar figure finally appeared at the White Rum Street telegraph office across the street. The figure was thin, wearing an old overcoat that didn't suit his age, and a brown bowler hat. He looked around visibly uneasy, then pulled his hat down lower, tightened his overcoat, and quickly entered the White Rum Street telegraph office. In the instant that figure glanced around, Leonardo keenly noticed that the face possessed a maturity beyond its years, and striking red eyes. Ian Wright has finally appeared. Leonardo muttered to himself, while also noticing that the various factions that were also lying in wait around him were gradually making moves. The first to be eliminated should be Intis's intelligence personnel. They were divided into 2 or 3 groups, with some staying in the restaurant to wait and monitor the surrounding environment, while others went out of the restaurant and headed to the White Rum Street telegraph office across the street. After that small group of people left, several individuals who clearly resembled Lowen also began to leave the restaurant. Leonardo guessed that the last to catch up were members of MI9. At that moment, Leonardo snapped his fingers and called over a waiter. "Bill, please." After paying for lunch, coffee, and dessert, Leonardo casually walked out of the restaurant, following the intelligence agents at a distance. Nighttime, East Borough, Red Brick Alley. Ian Wright has just contacted his boss, and the two have agreed to meet the following morning. He nervously hugged the bag in front of his chest, glancing around at his surroundings every now and then, his expression clearly uneasy. He pushed aside the rusty iron door, ducked into a dark, cramped, and dirty room, where the air smelled damp and musty. Ian Wright didn't turn on the gas light. He skillfully found his own bed and nimbly dodged his roommate, who was already fast asleep on the floor. He curled up and pressed his old satchel tightly against the floor. Just then, a commotion suddenly broke out outside. "This is it. I saw that brat sneak in with my own eyes. Are there any other people inside? If we kill them all, then there won't be any more." "Do it." Ian Wright instantly realized the danger. He quickly jumped off the bunk bed, crawled under it, and hid in the shadows. He could tell from their accents that the people outside the door were members of the Zigmund gang. The Zigmund gang members are all from the Highlands. They are burly and tall, and their internal language is not Lowen, but rather a modified form of Intis with a difficult accent. Ian Wright hid in the shadows under the bed. His roommate, who was sleeping on a makeshift bed on the floor, was still fast asleep, snoring loudly. Yet, he could still clearly hear the pounding of his own heart. Clang! A dull thud echoed from the rusty iron door. Ian Wright was extremely nervous. He curled up, clenched his fists, and cold sweat seeped from his palms. Time ticked by, and the sounds of impact continued to pound against Ian's eardrums. After an unknown amount of time, the muffled thuds of the metal door suddenly stopped, replaced by a series of piercing gunshots. Bang! Bang bang bang! Gunfire! Ian Wright murmured. "The Zigmund gang is fighting with other factions." Ian crawled out from under the bed and pressed his ear close to the rusty iron door. Through the iron door, the sounds he could hear were not clear, only the continuous gunfire pierced through the iron door and reached his heart. Ian did not choose to stay put. He knew he had been exposed and had to run away quickly. So he hugged his bag tightly, went to the window opposite the iron door, and nimbly climbed out. Under the moonlight, the red moon was obscured by dark clouds and thick fog. There were very few gas lamps in East Borough, and the whole street and alley was immersed in darkness. Ian, his body low to the ground, wearing that ill-fitting old coat, quickly fled in the opposite direction of the gunfire. The piercing gunshots faded into the distance, and Ian gradually calmed down, but he still didn't stop walking. As he ran out of Red Brick Alley and rounded a corner, a familiar voice came from behind him. "Where are you going?" Upon hearing the sound, Ian stopped in his tracks and turned around abruptly. Moriarty detective. To his astonishment, Leonardo, disguised as Sherlock Moriarty, slowly emerged from the shadows. Leonardo's gaze was fixed on Ian Wright's red eyes, while the color at his fingertips changed, and his eyes shone brightly. "Give me the Hermos manuscript." 117 Chapter 117 This is Deduction. Chapter 117 This is Deduction. On Monday morning, Klein woke up naturally and prepared 2 slices of toast, a piece of butter, a serving of bacon, and a cup of coffee for himself. He leisurely read the newspaper while having breakfast. He had just picked up the newspaper in the living room, intending to go to the sitting room or bedroom to look through it, when he suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Amidst the clanging and jingling sounds, Klein suddenly tensed up, put on a coat made of various materials with unusual vigilance, and headed towards the door. Outside the door, Ian, wearing an old coat, stood there, his bright red eyes deep and somewhat bewildered. As Klein grew suspicious, he took 2 steps back and opened the door. Detective Moriarty. Ian removed his brown bowler hat and bowed slightly. You found me last night. I wanted the manuscript back. I don't know why I gave it to you. I felt like I was being driven by some force. Ian recalled seeing Sherlock Moriarty while escaping in East Borough last night. The situation during detection, he had a vague feeling that the person from last night wasn't Sherlock Moriarty. It wasn't the detective, but someone else, so at the crack of dawn, he went to door to confirm whether the manuscript had been stolen by Sherlock Moriarty. Detective took it. Klein frowned slightly and said, "Last night. I didn't go to see you last night." "What manuscript?" Ian paused, his gaze shifting from expectation to disappointment. If the manuscript was by Sherlock Moriarty, if the detective takes it, he can still ask the other party for it back. Even though he doesn't want to return it, Ian can also inform Zerial's superior of this clue, and Zerial's superior will ask for the manuscript back. If the person who took the manuscript last night wasn't the real Sherlock Moriarty, then it means Ian has completely lost control of the manuscript, and all clues and recent efforts have been cut off. Having lost the clues to the manuscript, Ian understood that once he fell into the hands of the Zygmunt gang, they would kill him without mercy. Thinking about this, Ian began to tremble with fear. Go find Zerial's boss, maybe there's still a chance. Ian kept reassuring himself. Klein noticed that Ian was acting strangely, so he turned to the side and gestured for him to enter. Would you like to come in and have a chat? Ian's thoughts were interrupted by Klein's voice. He lowered his eyes and shook his head. No, Moriarty detective, I have other things to do. As soon as he finished speaking, Ian turned and left. The morning in Backland was shrouded in thick fog, with a light drizzle falling on the bluestone ground. Ian stepped out from under the eaves, tightened his coat, and disappeared around the corner. Klein closed the door, sat back on the sofa, and quickly went to above the gray fog for a divination. The parchment scroll beside him read, Ian Wright's experience last night. The illusory dream gradually emerged, and Klein saw Ian Wright curled up on the top bunk of the bunk bed and hiding under the bottom bunk. Then he saw Ian Wright crawl out from under the bed, lie on the iron door listening to the sounds outside, and then frantically leap out of the window, escaping Red Brick Alley under the cover of night. In the final scene of the dream, Klein saw Ian Wright being suddenly stopped in his tracks. The person who stopped Ian Wright was none other than Klein himself, or rather, the guy who looked exactly like Sherlock Moriarty. Click. The dream shattered, frozen on Sherlock Moriarty's face. Klein snapped out of the dream, took a deep breath, and broke out in a cold sweat. He was able to make a preliminary confirmation that the guy who disguised himself as him was the mysterious person who had sneaked into his room and examined the note on the table in the early hours of yesterday morning. He remembered that the person had black hair and blue eyes. Klein picked up another parchment and rewrote the divination statement. The person who disguised himself as me last night. Illusory dreams appeared like bubbles, and Klein leaned back in his bronze high-backed chair, returning to the dream world. However, he did not gain any enlightenment during this dream divination. He couldn't see any environment or people, only a mist that emerged from his spiritual sense filled the entire dream. It's spirituality fog again. It's anti-divination again. Klein's heart sank, and he suddenly remembered something. He emerged from the dream again and quickly wrote on the parchment. The whereabouts of Leonardo Mayer Connor. A detached 2-story house in Sherwood Borough, Isengard Stanton. Leonardo, now in Poirot's form and utterly exhausted, returned to the house, where he met Isengard Stanton, who had just woken up, in the living room. Isengard noticed the dark circles under Leonardo's eyes and the obvious signs of aging in his voice. Did you go investigate the commissioned investigation? Actually, you don't need to go to such lengths. After all, Ambassador Bakerland is a Beyonder, and he must have many Beyonders protecting him. Getting evidence won't be an easy task. Generally speaking, when private detectives complete major cases, they often spend a long time and cycle, sometimes even a whole month. Hey, if you keep pushing yourself like this, you'll probably die before you even get close to the truth. Isengard joked, but still handed Leonardo a cup of hot water. Leonardo took the hot water and slammed the crossbody bag containing Hermos's manuscript onto the table. The hot water chased away the chill from his body. Leonardo wearily lifted his eyelids, looked at Isengard Stanton, and slowly said, "The evidence has been found." Isengard also made himself a cup of coffee, but after taking just one sip, he almost spat it out because of something Leonardo said. "What? You found evidence?" Isengard was both surprised and delighted. He quickly put down his coffee and rummaged through his crossbody bag to find the manuscript. Hermos manuscript. Manuscripts involving the third-generation difference engine. With his vast knowledge base, Detective Isengard quickly recognized the contents of the manuscript. He froze on the spot as if struck by lightning, constantly browsing the contents of the manuscript. But what does this have to do with Ambassador Bakerland? Leonardo drank the hot water in one gulp and then recounted the whole story in detail. "I think you should know Ziriel, detective, right? He's dead. It happened about 3 or 4 days ago, done by the Zigmund gang. Ziriel, the detective's true identity, is Fasak's spy. He selected and raised many homeless children in East Borough, using their inconspicuousness to secretly gather intelligence, and eventually obtained clues to the manuscript. However, the Zigmund gang has actually been taken over by Door of Intis's intelligence department. Ambassador Bakerland is the mastermind behind it all. His goal is to steal the manuscript and bring it back to Intis." After Leonardo gave his concise summary, he then told Isengard that he had infiltrated Sherlock Moriarty. The detective searches for clues inside the house and also stakes out Ian Wright. Isengard was deeply moved after hearing Leonardo's story. "You actually managed to deduce Ziriel from just a tiny bit of information in the commission. Detective and his teenage informant. How exactly did you do that?" Leonardo stretched wearily, rubbed his temples, and answered succinctly. "Reasoning. Actually, it's entirely because I've read the original book's plot." Leonardo quickly added in his mind. It took Isengard a while to recover, and he laughed loudly while praising Leonardo's talent. Finally, Leonardo interrupted his laughter. "So, Mr. Isengard," Leonardo looked up into the other man's cloudy eyes, "can you tell me about the obstacles you face in seeking a promotion?" Isengard sat down, his eyes beginning to show trust. "I'm still missing one main material. I need the stomach of a white-tailed red fox." 118 Chapter 118 Klein's Speculation. Chapter 118 Klein's Speculation. "I'll keep an eye out for you, Mr. Stanton." After saying that, Leonardo turned around and went back to his room, buried himself in the covers, and started to catch up on sleep. Above the gray fog, Klein snapped out of his dream divination. Just now, he had seen Leonardo, who resembled Poirot, lying asleep in bed, and began to speculate. Leonardo can actually transform into other people's appearances, and he can even simulate their voices. What kind of Beyonder ability is this? Furthermore, why did he take the manuscript from Ian, and why did he fake his death before? If what I just saw was really Leonardo, he's in Backland right now, and this guy only found out where Ian was yesterday morning when he broke into my room. In any case, he probably didn't recognize me and doesn't know that Klein Moretti has come back from the dead. Klein wrote new questions on the parchment scroll. What has Leonardo Mayor Connor been doing lately? Klein suddenly realized that every time he consulted the oracle about Leonardo, the process seemed very simple, and the insights he gained were much clearer than when he consulted the oracle about other things. Perhaps this is because I planted the gray mist inside him. Klein didn't think any further, leaned back, and entered the dream again. In this dream, Klein sees Leonardo transformed into James, join the police force, and rescue the kidnapped monster, Admissal. After that, he saw Leonardo test old Neil, who ultimately committed suicide. He saw Leonardo transform into Kenley during the capture of Mrs. Sharon, fighting alongside him and ultimately killing Mrs. Sharon. He saw Leonardo suddenly reappear when Megos went to Blackthorn Security Company, and used the power of Nightmare to pull everyone into the same dream. He also saw Leonardo take St. Selena's ashes from Dunn, transform into Dunn's appearance, and return them to Channy's gate. At the end of the dream, Leonardo encounters Ince Zangwill, escapes from his clutches, and later goes to Raphael's cemetery to offer flowers to Klein himself. The dream vanished in an instant, and Klein felt as if he had watched a very immersive movie. He raised his head, his gaze piercing through the hazy gray mist, fixing on the high-backed chair that symbolized the tower. Was this guy actually trying to stop Ince Zangwill all along? And he also realized that he was being manipulated by 008, which is why he came up with the fake death plan to make Ince Zangwill believe that he was dead, so that he would stop using 008 to target him. Leonardo is very smart, Klein silently praised, while wondering about Leonardo's secret. In his view, Leonardo inexplicably learned of the three-part title he had just chosen and was pulled into the gray fog by Qing by praying to the fool, thus joining tarot gathering. Although Leonardo brushed it off with prophecy, even though he seemed to genuinely possess the ability to prophesy. Perhaps Leonardo's initial goal wasn't to have the fool save him, but rather to join the tarot gathering. After faking his death, on the very night Leonardo was not pulled into the gray fog by the fool Qing, he prayed to the fool again, hoping to return to tarot gathering. Thinking of this, Qing gasped and hissed softly. Qing then suddenly realized that his identity had been subtly exposed ever since Leonardo faked his death. Leonardo had just faked his death, and news of his assassination attempt was published in major newspapers and spread rapidly. Qing subconsciously believed that Leonardo was really dead, so he didn't try to bring him into the tarot gathering, nor did he confirm whether he was really dead. When Leonardo pleads with the fool to rejoin the tarot gathering, it's almost certain that the fool exists in Tingen City, or rather, his blessedness resides in Tingen City. Qing's mind raced, and he began to rethink things from a different perspective. Perhaps, in the prophecy Leonardo received, Qing Moretti is the fool's blessed, not the fool himself. This is from Leonardo in Above the Grey Fog. The great respect tarot showed the fool during the gathering is evident in this. If that were all, Leonardo wouldn't have known about Qing's resurrection. Qing's thoughts were racing, with one conjecture after another popping up in his mind, yet he would involuntarily pause, lacking any clues. He felt that Leonardo Mayor Connor was a man with far too many secrets. How could a mayor, someone who came into contact with the Beander world later than I did, possibly possess so many pathway potion formulas? Furthermore, Leonardo was clearly much more relaxed than the other members in the task of searching for Russell's diary. At each gathering, he could provide himself with 2 pages of the diary. Based on his observations in Tingen City, Leonardo almost never searched for the Russell's diary, not even once. And then there's that accurate prophecy, and the various Beander abilities he can unleash. Qing was lost in thought and almost forgot about the time. When he took out his pocket watch to check the time, he suddenly realized that there were only 2 minutes left until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He had almost missed it. Qing calmed himself down, regained his composure, and told little son through the gray fog that he could start counting heartbeats. Then, as the clock struck 3, Qing projected his thoughts onto the crimson stars, pulling the tarot club members into Above the Gray Fog. A detached house in Isengard Stanton, with a guest room on the ground floor. While Leonardo was sleeping, a deep red light suddenly appeared before his eyes, and layers of illusory gray mist emerged. When he regained consciousness, he found himself above the gray fog. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. Good afternoon, Mr. Tower. Good afternoon." Justice Audrey's usual greeting gradually brought Leonardo back to his senses, and he began to think about the tarot gathering's request. Leonardo has been so busy investigating Ambassador Bakerland lately that he forgot the date. If the fool Qing hadn't pulled him into the gray fog in a one-sided, irresistible way, Leonardo might have missed the tarot gathering. "I don't have anything to delegate lately. I'm still a while away from promotion, and I don't have any needs in terms of mystical items. Drake should be close to advancing to Sequence 8 soon, it's time to prepare a potion for him. At the same time, I also need to help Mr. Isengard Stanton find what he needs. This is essentially like searching for clues to the main materials for my promotion. If someone can complete this commission, then we can keep an eye on that person next time." Leonardo was thinking, while simultaneously manifesting his own Russell's diary for the fool Qing this week. During this time, Leonardo vaguely felt that the fool Qing seemed to be observing him. 119 Chapter 11 WR, that has changed its appearance. Chapter 119 The changed appearance of Tower. Leonardo is frighteningly consistent when it comes to submitting Russell's diaries, Qing remarked, ceasing his speculation and instead browsing the contents of his notes. During this time, Leonardo noticed that Justice Audrey, instead of immediately observing and analyzing the other members as before, seemed somewhat excited. "Promoted," Leonardo guessed, glancing at little son Derek beside him. Seeing that the other was also very excited, he made the same guess as Justice Audrey. Noticing Mr. Tower's gaze, little son Derek immediately sat up straight. Leonardo then turned his attention back to the tarot gathering deal. But when Justice Audrey glanced at her, she keenly sensed that something seemed different about the tower today. Despite the hazy gray fog, Audrey could still make out the figure, general appearance, and hair color. She suddenly noticed that Tower had not only changed in size, but even his previously blonde hair had turned black. Can Mr. Tower also change his appearance? Qilangos was able to do so using mystical items before, but does Mr. Tower also rely on mystical items? Or is this his own Beander ability? But why did he change his appearance? The Hanged Man Alger also noticed this and began to speculate about Mr. Tower's changes. His doubts were similar to those of Justice Audrey, but his final conclusion was more precise. Mr. Tower has probably been infiltrating or hiding his identity recently. This could be for a mission, or it could be for his own promotion. Little son, Derek failed to notice this, still basking in the joy of receiving both Sequence 8 and Sequence 7 potion formulas from Tower, Leonardo last week. However, after browsing through this week's Russell's diary, the fool Klein also noticed Leonardo's changes. Now he was completely certain that Leonardo could indeed change his appearance, just like Qilangos, and that it was Leonardo who took the Hermos manuscript that Ian Wright had found. Knock knock knock. The fool Klein tapped the bronze table 3 times, marking the start of the commission and transaction process. Leonardo gathered his thoughts and then noticed the gazes of the other members. He then realized that he had forgotten to use his faceless ability to revert to his original appearance before entering the gray fog. However, he wasn't worried about this, since his high sequence persona had already been firmly established in tarot gathering, and it wasn't uncommon for a high sequence powerhouse to be able to change his appearance. However, he still couldn't help but think that chronic sleep deprivation could indeed make people forgetful, just like Dunn Smith. Leonardo wisely refrained from speaking first, understanding that the fool Klein was about to issue a commission to assassinate Ambassador Bakerland. Klein tapped the edge of the old table lightly with his fingers and chuckled softly. I am going to issue a task. A mission. Justice Audrey's ears twitched, and his eyes widened, filled with surprise, anticipation, and trepidation. The Hanged Man Alger appears outwardly unchanged, but is actually unusually tense. Little son, Derek, oblivious, thinks this is perfectly normal. Tower showed no emotional change, as if it had expected this all along. Hiss. No wonder he's called Tower, because he can predict the future. He's probably Mr. Foles, blessed one, chosen to be the representative of the Tarot Club and set an example. However, considering that this was the first time the fool had officially issued a mission, Audrey sat up straight and prepared herself. You can choose to accept it or not. Klein made his tone quite relaxed. Another blessed person of mine has arrived in Backland. He wants to get something done, but it's inconvenient for him to do it himself. Blessed, have you arrived in Backland? The Hanged Man Alger was the first to grasp the key point. He suddenly realized it was the transformed Tower. It wasn't convenient for him to come forward himself. Alger didn't respond, but nodded thoughtfully, becoming even more certain that Tower was indeed the blessed of the fool. Audrey, now a telepathist, suddenly realized what was happening and began to imagine the sudden transformation of the Tower. Could this be a commission from Tower? No one raised their hand to speak at the Tarot Club, so Klein issued the task. What he wanted to accomplish was to assassinate the Intis Republic's ambassador to the Kingdom of Loan, Jean Maiden Bakerland. Assassinate the Intis Republic ambassador. Justice Audrey couldn't contain himself and asked in astonishment. This is an act that could cause conflict between the two countries, or even war. As a proper noble lady, her first thought is about international relations. Justice Audrey's gaze then fell upon Tower, Leonardo. If the goal is to assassinate Ambassador Bakerland, why would the powerful Mr. Tower entrust the task to us? Klein glanced around, maintaining his relaxed demeanor, and said, who among you is willing to take on this mission? What kind of reward do you want? The members of the Tarot Club hesitated. After all, this concerned the international situation, and assassinating someone without any reason was not the Tarot Club's usual style of doing things. Just then, the Hanged Man chuckled and said, I've heard that this Ambassador Bakerland is also the Intis Republic's intelligence chief in the kingdom. He secretly supports the bloody marches, orchestrates events that damage the relationship between nobles and the wealthy, and spreads rumors to incite the people against the government. He seemed to sense Justice's hesitation and described Bakerland's dark side in detail. He then added, I'm not sure if this ambassador is Beander, but many clues suggest that he probably is. He has many Beyonders around him, Beyonders belonging to the Intis Intelligence Agency, and this door has long been influenced by the former royal family Sauron family, and controls the first part of the Hunter pathway sequence. Moreover, whether war breaks out between the two countries depends solely on whether the upper echelons of both sides want to fight, and has nothing to do with the life or death of a diplomat. Leonardo followed up with a statement providing more detailed information. Bakerland is Hunter Pathways, Conspirer, Sequence 6, excels at persuasion and possesses extraordinary abilities in misleading, confusing, and deceiving others. Conspirer's physique has been enhanced to a certain extent, and it is good at manipulating flames with precision, and can shape the flames into different shapes at will. He was accompanied by a Sequence 5 bodyguard, marionettist, Sequence 5, seer. Pathway. If you're not confident in your own abilities, please don't rashly face this, marionettist, from Sequence 5. Quote, he possesses one of the most formidable Beander abilities below the high sequence level, spirit body threads. Justice Audrey was already keen to take on the fool's case, so she showed great interest in the information Leonardo provided and actively pressed for details. Spirit body threads. What kind of ability is that? Leonardo explained in detail. It can see and manipulate spirit body threads, directly affecting the target's spiritual body, astral body, mental body, and etheric body, and then using the etheric body as a bridge to control the target's physical body. Every living being has spirit body threads. The marionettist can easily find hidden targets and control them like a puppet, making their thinking slow, their bodies stiff, and their movements sluggish. It is a form of forced control, and one can only break free by relying on the strength of one's own spirit. Moreover, with the passage of time and the deepening of control, the target can be completely turned into one's own puppet, allowing one to fight from behind the scenes at a certain distance. 120 Chapter 120 Human Relationships. Chapter 120 Human Relationships. Mr. Tower really knows a lot about the various pathways, and he should also be investigating Ambassador Bakerland. It's reasonable to guess that Mr. Tower is the blessed that fool mentioned, right? After a few seconds of hesitation, Justice Audrey looked nervously and guiltily toward the head of the bronze table. Mr. Fool, I can try to complete this task, but I can't guarantee that I will succeed. The Fool Klein nodded slightly in response and slowly began to speak. What kind of compensation are you hoping to receive? The recipe for psychiatrist, Audrey quickly added, and the corresponding beyond ingredient. We can discuss that after the mission is complete. If it fails, I will bear the costs myself. I still owe you a bounty. As soon as she finished speaking, Audrey couldn't help but glance at Leonardo across from her. Immediately afterwards, the hanged man Alger also raised his hand. I'll also take this task, the reward can be determined after it's completed. Didn't you go back to sea? Audrey asked in surprise. My absence from Backland doesn't mean I can't assassinate Ambassador Bakerland, Alger said with a smile, offering no direct explanation. Little son, Derek never quite made it into the conversation. Just as she was completely confused, little son suddenly noticed that Tower next to her was looking at her. I still owe Mr. Tower a favor. Does he have a request for me to do? As they speculated, Leonardo slowly spoke. I remember you still owe me a favor, right? Derek nodded emphatically, his expression becoming serious. He feared he was not capable of fulfilling Mr. Tower's request, and in his view, Mr. Tower's strength was probably equal to, or even greater than, that of the chief. I need the stomach of a white-tailed red fox. Can you make that? A white-tailed red fox. Derek hesitated slightly, his mind quickly searching for the Beander creatures that frequently appeared around City of Silver. After thinking for a while, little son, Derek believed he could do it. White-tailed red foxes were not uncommon around the City of Silver. No problem, he replied quickly. It seems that when I need a promotion, I can also ask son for help. Leonardo thought, not responding to little son anymore, but turning his gaze to Justice Audrey and the hanged man Alger. I also need the roots of the foul-smelling flower cluster and the tongue of the sharp-toothed parrot. Who among you can get them? Mr. Tower is issuing another request for the beyond ingredient. His needs are really huge, Audrey thought for a moment, then sighed and smiled to herself, speaking of which, almost half of the requests for the Tarot Club are issued by Mr. Tower. Audrey was about to raise her hand, but then remembered that she had just accepted the Fool's commission, so she lowered her hand and turned her gaze to the hanged man Alger. At this moment, the hanged man Alger chuckled and said, I accept the commission from Tower. I can find it, it's not difficult. What kind of reward do you want? Leonardo countered. The hanged man Alger pondered for a moment, reflecting on what he was still lacking. Leonardo looked slightly nervous. The hanged man Alger had already obtained the recipe for Wind Blessed, and was still digesting the potion. If he really wanted Leonardo to help him find the potion with the Wind Blessed recipe, it would be very difficult for Leonardo. However, Hunter Pathway the Provoker material in Sequence 8 is not equivalent to the Wind Blessed material, so Leonardo believes that the hanged man Alger will not make such a request rashly. If he wanted money, Leonardo had enough to pay, but that would plunge him back into poverty. Raising one or two Beyonders really costs a lot of money, Leonardo thought to himself without changing his expression, glancing at Alger beside him, waiting for the other's response. After a long silence, the hanged man Alger finally made his decision. Since Leonardo only needs a low-sequence Beander ingredient, which is not difficult to obtain, it is very simple for Alger at present. Therefore, the hanged man Alger was prepared to go along with it and do him a favor. When trying to curry favor with someone in a high position, one cannot be too direct. Therefore, Alger's request should be as simple as possible. He firmly believes that a tower, who is well versed in the world of beyond and has grown to a high sequence level, must be someone who understands human relationships. Alger gathered his thoughts and looked at Leonardo with a kind expression. Mr. Tower, you have always been very generous to me, and I don't need anything more for the time being. You just need to tell me which pathway and which sequence this is the recipe for. To thank you for your generosity. Alger added at the end, then looked at the fool Klein at the head of the table, hoping to have a private conversation. As the hazy, layered gray fog gradually gathered until, little sun, and justice were no longer visible, Leonardo slowly spoke. This belongs to Hunter Pathways Sequence 8 Feet Provoker. Quote. Leonardo was both surprised and delighted by Alger's reaction. Fortunately, Alger from the hanged man was mature enough. If it were the naive, little son, he certainly wouldn't have considered things as far ahead or as deeply as Alger. If it were the new members later on, especially Moon, Leonardo would probably only pay a higher price and encounter more difficulties. Alger nodded as if he had expected it. Having spent years at sea, he was no stranger to the Hunter Pathway. I will find the Beander ingredient you need as soon as possible. After Alger finished speaking, the fool Klein continued to disperse the surrounding gray fog, making it thinner, and the shadows of Justice and Little Sun gradually appeared in Leonardo's sight. Looking at the many empty bronze benches on the Justice Audrey side, Leonardo's thoughts wandered uncontrollably. Speaking of which, Miss Magician should be joining the Tarot Club soon, right? However, the world should have joined earlier. And once the world joins, Tarot Club will also have the blasphemy card made by Russell, the Black Emperor card. While Leonardo's thoughts wandered, the members of Tarot Club began discussing the ancient god legends brought by Little Sun. Audrey thus learned of the existence of the Dragon of Imagination. However, Leonardo and Alger were naturally excluded and unable to hear it directly. After exchanging words for a while, the fool Klein announced the end of this week's Tarot Club. Back in the real world, Leonardo was no longer sleepy, so he went out of his room, washed up quickly, and saw Isengard Stanton, who had just returned from outside the door looking travel-worn. Isengard was clearly excited. He stretched out his arms and pulled Leonardo into a tight embrace. Little Poirot, your abilities are simply unbelievable. Please allow me to address you this way. Leonardo responded with a smile, pushing away Isengard's hug with all his might. Immediately afterwards, he asked, "What's going on, Mr. Stanton? Why are you so happy?" Isengard still wore a joyful smile. Our commission was completed very successfully. Prince Edisic Augustus wishes to see us. Hearing this, Leonardo did not share Isengard's excitement. He clearly remembered that, through a series of coincidences arranged from 0 to 08, the prince fell madly in love with Trissa and ultimately died by suicide. Moreover, he had even met this prince once before. Why Prince Edisic? Am I being targeted by Prince Zangwill again? Leonardo's lips twitched as he thought about it, and he couldn't help but shiver. 121 Chapter 121 Brave One's Bar. Chapter 121 Braveheart's Bar. Prince Edisic originally wanted us to attend the ball at Ambassador Bakerland, but considering that we've investigated him, he's planning to invite us to his residence next time. Haha, little Poirot, I didn't expect your very first job in Backland to attract the attention of such an important person. Once a private detective gains the favor of a big shot, his reputation will spread throughout the streets and alleys. Isengard walked past Leonardo and sat down in the armchair. I've learned from some intelligence that the official department door, who commissioned us, is planning to arrest Ambassador Bakerland at the ball. Haha, you're about to become an overnight sensation, Poirot. Leonardo had no interest in sharing Isengard's joy. Instead, he was preoccupied with something amiss. I used the spirituality fog method to interfere with the divination, and I don't know if Rosago will come after door. However, judging from Isengard's appearance, he has probably already submitted the Hermos manuscript to MI9. Bakerland is currently in a predicament because of the mission failure. He can't return to Intis, but he can't stay in Loen either. We have to be wary of Bakerland's counterattack. Who knows what crazy things they might do if the mission fails. With that in mind, Leonardo decided it was necessary to give Isengard a word of advice. Mr. Stanton, we're probably being targeted by Bakerland. Isengard dismissed this, and instead took out a standard contract from his drawer. Don't worry, the official door will send people to protect us. Besides, I've already submitted the Hermos manuscript. Here, sign this. Isengard handed the standard contract to Leonardo and pointed to the pen lying flat on the table. Hearing Isengard's reply, Leonardo was relieved and no longer worried about Bakerland retaliating. Moreover, he should hate Sherlock Moriarty the most right now, not Poirot Christie. After all, Sherlock Moriarty, aka Klein, was the key person who ruined his plans. Leonardo took the standard contract and quickly began to browse through it. This is an employment contract. Isengard Stanton, the great detective, hired Poirot Christie as his assistant for a weekly wage of £3. Leonardo quickly signed it, put the pen back on the table, and returned the standard contract to Isengard Stanton. Meanwhile, Leonardo was also thinking about the future. Now that I have successfully gained Isengard Stanton's trust, well, next I'll join his Beander party. I need to get involved in more of the Beander community, and I also need to get involved in more mid-sequences. Beander, and teach them the acting method, which will greatly improve their skills later. The Sleepless, Arbiter, Hunter, and Savant pathways can be disregarded. I already have preparations and candidates. During my time in Backland, I had to teach how to generate more mid-sequences. Beander needs to understand the acting method. As for Prince Edisic's invitation, although it would allow me to reunite with Trissa and possibly be rewritten into the story by Ince, the benefits might outweigh the risks. After all, I can use Prince Edisic to connect with other Beyonders. However, now that I've arrived in Backland, it's time for me to go find Lenevis. He should be the Beander of the mid-sequence by now. I can try to teach him the acting method first, and then kill him. With my ability to simulate various Beander abilities, I am confident that I can kill any Beander in the same sequence, unless they are bizarre or have extremely strong combat abilities. Lost in thought, Isengard Stanton suddenly spoke, interrupting Leonardo. Little Poirot, didn't you want to join my Beander party? Let's start tonight. I think you've had enough rest by now, haven't you? Leonardo did not refuse, but nodded slightly in agreement, and followed Isengard out of the door and into the taxi. Isengard hosted the Beander party at the Braveheart bar, located on Iron Door Street in the Backland Bridge area. Leonardo followed Isengard, watching him enter with practiced ease, walk past the patrons cheering him on around the boxing ring, and arrive at the bar, where he tapped on the table. The bartender hesitated for a moment after seeing Isengard and then glancing at Leonardo behind him. He's fine, he's my new assistant. Isengard spoke up to explain, and only then did the bartender reply. Caspers is there. This was the bar's peak business hours. As soon as Leonardo entered, he felt the heat wave, smelled the strong aroma of malt liquor, and heard the noisy commotion. Following the bartender's direction, the first thing that catches the eye is the two stages in the center of the bar. One stage is where a dog and mouse game is taking place, while the other stage has two boxers patiently waiting, preparing for the upcoming fight. Leonardo's gaze involuntarily focused on the ring stage. The two boxers initially tested each other with a few punches, until one of them suddenly unleashed his power, seized an opportunity, and knocked out his opponent with a single punch, causing a deafening roar of cheers to erupt throughout the bar. Amid the cheers, a very clear curse was uttered. "You useless piece of trash. I'd be better off playing." Following the sound, Leonardo saw a man in his 50s with a large nose, wearing a linen shirt, lying under the ring, pounding the ring with his hands, his face full of anger. Isengard quickly stepped forward, waved to the man who was over 50, and shouted, "Caspers, hello." Caspers recognized Isengard waiting at the bar, so he spat at the boxer lying on the ring one last time, squeezed through the jubilant crowd, and walked over. He had a large, everted scar on his face that stretched from the corner of his right eye to the right side of his mouth, and his nose was a typical rosacea, almost completely stained red. "Come on, I'll take you there." He spoke directly through the door, while glancing at Leonardo behind Isengard. "Who is he?" "My new assistant," Isengard introduced again. Caspers didn't pay much attention and led the two of them, limping, towards the bar's kitchen. From there, they entered the alley behind the bar and circled around to a dark house. He took out an iron mask that could cover half of his face and a black hooded robe, and handed them to the two men. Once Leonardo and Isengard were ready, Caspers rhythmically knocked on the door. 7 or 8 seconds later, a small wooden board on the door was suddenly pulled open, revealing brown eyes behind it. After the waiters, who were also wearing iron masks and hooded robes, confirmed the two men's identities, they stepped aside to make way for them. Caspers was left outside the door, and the waiter led the two of them through the darkness living room and into the first-floor living room. A candle was lit on the coffee table, its dim, yellowish light casting shadows throughout the room. There was no one in the room. The waiter turned around and bowed respectfully to Isengard. "Eye of wisdom, old gentleman. Can we begin this party?" Isengard nodded slightly in response, then gestured for Leonardo to find a seat. His tone became serious as he instructed the waiter. "It's almost time, let's bring in the rest of the party members." 122 Chapter 122 Gathering of Extraordinary Beings. Chapter 122 Beyond Gathering. Leonardo sat on the sofa closest to Isengard, his gaze passing through the iron mask as he watched one identically dressed person after another being led in by the waiters. After everyone had taken their seats, a chubby-faced man complained. "Recently, a group of wild animals have appeared in the sewers and have eaten up many of the herbs I planted. They are very smart and didn't touch the poisonous ones. I need someone to help me clean them up. You know, this isn't my specialty. I'm only good at mixing medicines to treat your illnesses." Apothecary, Darkwill. Leonardo quickly recognized the chubby man. He must be looking to buy the recipe for Beast Tamer. Leonardo was thinking when he saw the door to the living room open again, and the same man walked in and sat down in a quiet corner. "Klein." Leonardo remained silent, his movements unchanged, guessing in his mind. Klein has just issued a commission to assassinate Ambassador Bakerland, and is now likely looking for a bodyguard. The chubby Darkwill, without even looking up and ignoring Klein's sudden intrusion, continued. "I'll repeat myself, I need someone to help me clear the newly appeared wild animals from the sewers, just the Backland Bridge area. I'll pay with 4 bottles of precious medicine, 2 of which can effectively stop bleeding and promote wound healing. Believe me, this is better than getting stitches at a clinic, and it will work for up to 6 months." The man, who appeared to be apothecary, stated his request and conditions. He suddenly chuckled softly and continued his description. "The other 2 bottles, with a shelf life of 1.5 months, can help men rediscover the impulses they had when they were 17 or 18, turning them into beyonders in bed. Hee, you know what I mean. Even after the expiration date, it will still have an effect, except that it will expand from there to the whole body, making the user extremely violent, with a significant increase in strength, speed, and agility. Well, after half an hour, they will fall into weakness." Leonardo wasn't interested in Darkwill's potion, so he didn't consider taking on his commission. While hemostatic agents do provide some protection, Leonardo doesn't need them right now. He can make his own, and although they're not as effective as apothecary, they can still solve some immediate problems. In addition to the 4 precious potions, I'll add an extra 30 pounds. Seeing no one respond, Darkwill immediately increased his offer. At this moment, a man on the edge of the sofa spoke up. "I accept this commission. You will prepay 2 bottles of the potion, 1 of each, with Mr. Eye of Wisdom as the witness." "No problem," Isengard nodded from the armchair. Darkwill's request had just ended when another woman spoke up. "I want to sell 2 weapons." Her voice had barely faded when it drew the attention of everyone in the living room. Leonardo couldn't help but realize that the abilities he could currently simulate weren't suitable for direct combat, and purchasing a suitable mystical item with direct combat capabilities would improve his strength. The woman emphasized that the weapon was not a mystical item or a sealed artifact, which means that the weapon in her hand did not have any annoying side effects. Buying weapons is much more effective than buying medicine, Leonardo thought. Suddenly, all eyes were on her, and the woman was clearly uncomfortable, but she managed to keep her composure and began introducing the items she had brought for sale. One is a runic steel sword, made by the Church of Eternal Blazing Sun. It has purifying and exorcising effects, making it the nemesis of undead creatures such as water ghosts, wraiths, and zombies. It can be used for 3 years. Of course, its sharpness is enough to kill. The woman's voice rose and fell, clearly to conceal her features. 500 pounds, or the recipe for Sequence 8 Barbarian, and you can get it. Upon hearing the woman's description, Leonardo immediately perked up. Using the recipe to redeem it is exactly what Leonardo wanted. Furthermore, the woman wanted a Barbeam recipe, which falls under the lawyer pathway, a pathway Leonard had never seen before. Overall, it's worth a try. The woman then began to describe the second weapon. A meat saw with an ingenious mechanical structure, it can transform and is easy to carry. It is a practical weapon, crafted by an outstanding craftsman, and is not common, 25 pounds. This weapon was not within Leonardo's consideration. After all, for Beander's combat, it was probably not as useful as the first item, the runic steel sword. Leonardo was about to call out, "Bid," when he noticed that others around him were already eager to participate. "I'll offer 500 pounds for your runic steel sword." A gloomy-looking man spoke up. The woman selling weapons immediately looked at the man, slightly disappointed. She had intended to trade them for the barbarian formula, but £500 was acceptable. Just as the woman was about to agree, Leonardo interrupted her. I have the recipe for barbarians. His voice wasn't loud, but it still drew the attention of those around him. The woman's gaze shifted from disappointment to delight. Suppressing her excitement, she said, Sir, I think I'd prefer to make a deal with you. Leonardo nodded slightly, and the gloomy man began the bidding. I'll offer £600. His voice was noticeably low and hoarse, making it easy to tell that this was the highest price he could afford. However, he was met with a polite rejection from the woman. I think I need the barbarian recipe more. Maybe we can make a deal when I get the weapons next time. The gloomy man fell silent and lowered his head in disappointment. Darkwill chimed in from the sidelines, adding insult to injury. Haha, gold pounds can never compare to potion formula. As soon as he finished speaking, the gloomy man became even more disappointed. Leonardo then took the paper and pen handed to him by the waiter and quickly wrote down the recipe. Main ingredients: 1 berserker grass, a solid unicorn horn crystal from an earth rhinoceros. The waiter then presented the recipe to Isengard for his approval, and only after Isengard's approval did Leonardo receive the runic steel sword from the lady. Although Mr. Stanton has lost 2081, with his long-standing prestige, I doubt anyone would dare to do anything under his nose, such as cheating or deception. Leonardo didn't think much more about it and examined the runic steel sword in his hand. The sword's blade gleamed silver, engraved with the church's sun runes and tiny purification spells, with a faint golden light flowing within the engravings. The hilt was shaped like the sun, and the hilt was wrapped with white leather. The sword was frighteningly thin. Just placing it on one's knees felt like it was carrying a gust of hot air. Not bad. Leonardo didn't rush to test the sword's power and put it away. Meanwhile, the woman selling the sword, after receiving Leonardo's potion formula, tried hard to suppress her emotions, but a slight smile still appeared on her lips. His second weapon was bought by a gloomy man who had failed to purchase a runic steel sword. The lady generously reduced the price by 5 gold coins, receiving only £20. Silence fell again. In a quiet corner, the man Leonard had previously guessed was Klein slowly spoke. I want to sell an item. Immediately afterwards, he took out a metal cigarette case from his pocket and pushed out the deep red Beander characteristic that looked like jelly. Upon seeing the distinctive metal cigarette box, Leonardo immediately recognized Klein's identity. This is something I got from a corpse. I don't know what it's for, but it seems quite magical. Perhaps any of you recognize it. A series of gazes scrutinized the dark red object in his hand. Several seconds passed without anyone speaking, and the living room was as quiet as a cemetery. Since 2081 is in my possession, Mr. Isengard didn't offer an explanation as he did in the original book. Maybe I can find an opportunity to lend it to him and charge him £2 in red each time. Leonardo thought to himself, sticking out his tongue, and then prepared to speak up to facilitate the deal. In the silence of the crowd, Leonardo chuckled. I recognize this thing. This is a beyond characteristic of the hunter pathway. 123 Chapter 123, A Bountiful Harvest. Chapter 123, A Bountiful Harvest. Sequence 9 is equivalent to a magic potion. After Leonardo finished speaking, the rest of the party members let out a slight hiss. They were able to confirm that Leonardo was attending the party for the first time. However, in just a few transactions, he had already attracted everyone's attention more than once, leaving others in awe. The one that was previously sold to Leonardo, the lady with the runic steel sword, praised it, saying, Sir, you are truly knowledgeable. Leonardo smiled in response, and then Isengard beside him spoke up. I'll offer £400, that's an absolutely fair price. Isengard had no doubt about Leonardo and he offered Klein the terms of the deal. Klein fell into deep thought, but quickly made a decision. Make a deal. However, sir, you don't need to pay right away. I have another request. What commission? Isengard asked in an aged voice. After considering his words for a moment, Klein said, Here's the thing, I've offended someone, well, according to what you guys call someone from Sequence 6, or maybe Sequence 5, and I'd like to hire a bodyguard. Sequence 6, maybe Sequence 5. Why don't you just die quietly? If we've reached that level, why would we need to attend these little parties? Darkwill blurted out, his surprise tinged with a hint of sneer. Although the other members of the gathering did not speak, their thoughts were largely the same, judging from the fact that no one accepted the task. Isengard chuckled and said, Perhaps you don't know enough about our circle. Sequence 6 or Sequence 5 are extremely powerful and terrifying figures. Yes, there have been quite a few instances of Sequence 8 or Sequence 9 killing strong individuals at this level, but these are experiences that are difficult to replicate. I don't think any of you here would be willing to take such a huge risk to protect you. If it can be confirmed that the other party is only Sequence 6 and does not have the corresponding mystical item, perhaps someone would take on this task. Well, I'm not sure, Klein shrugged and then said, then I'll just have to try to save myself. What can I buy with 400 pounds? The mystical item you guys were talking about. Meanwhile, Klein turned his attention to Leonardo. Although he did not recognize Leonardo's true identity, Leonardo's importance in Klein's mind had been subtly increased in the previous transaction. He felt that perhaps this knowledgeable gentleman possessed some skills that would allow him to save himself or find a bodyguard for help. Leonardo naturally noticed Klein's gaze, and shook his head, indicating that he was powerless to help. At this moment, a man who called himself Black Snake spoke up. I have a mystical item here, I'll sell it to you for 400 pounds. It allows you to hear the voice of great beings. If you are lucky enough to decipher useful information from it, you will become very powerful, and protecting yourself will no longer be a problem. Well, if you are unlucky and decipher a curse, or cannot decipher it at all, you will be harmed, or even die. Want to take a gamble? The listener's beyond characteristic. Leonardo quickly recognized it, and also realized that Klein would use this beyond characteristic to create the words of filth and defeat Rosago. In fact, if Klein hadn't been in dire need of saving himself, Leonardo would have really wanted to buy this beyonder characteristic and create a second, words of filth, charm. He had already fully experienced the power of this talisman when he faced Int Zangwil. It's okay, if I really want it, I can contact the Aurora Order. The Aurora Order controls the secret supplicant pathway, so there must be quite a few listeners within the organization, Leonardo thought, without interfering. Ultimately, despite Isengard's warning, Klein still chose to take a gamble and bought the Beyonder characteristic for 400 pounds. The living room, illuminated only by a single candle, was eerily silent. Seeing no one speak, Leonardo prepared to sell the surplus materials he had acquired. I have some Beyond ingredients here, I wonder if any of you are interested. As Leonardo spoke, he took out the variable curtain, placed it on his knees, and covered the runic steel sword. The next second, when he pulled back the curtain, the runic steel sword had been moved and replaced by 5 Beyond ingredients. 2 horns of the shimmering black serpent, 2 portions of lake spirit dust, and 1 liver of the 6-armed naga. These are the redundant parts that, Little Sun, and the Hanged Man collected for themselves last time. Everyone watched in amazement as Leonardo magically transformed the runic steel sword and produced 5 portions of Beyond ingredient. I believe that if someone needs them, they will naturally understand their value. Leonardo glanced around. However, I must remind you that these are the main materials for Sequence 7. Quote, hearing the words, Sequence 7 master material, many people are eager to try it out. Although mid-sequences are not as rare as high sequences, they are still considered precious compared to Sequence 8 and Sequence 9. This kind of material is often priceless and hard to find. Everyone present naturally understood its value, and even if it wasn't something they needed, they hoped to buy it at the cheapest possible price. This is similar to gold, and is considered an investment. Beyonders with lower sequence can use precious Beyonder ingredients to curry favor with Beyonders with higher sequence, and can also sell these materials at higher prices. I'll pay 2,500 pounds for 2 of them. Another woman in the corner raised her hand. According to market prices, the main ingredients for Sequence 7 should cost around 1,500 pounds, but since this is a private gathering and not an official event, the price is relatively lower. Please choose whatever you like, Leonardo replied with a smile, displaying the 5 Beyond ingredients to the lady. The lady spent a long time choosing before finally selecting a horn from a black snake with shimmering patterns and a piece of dust from the spirit of the lake. Leonardo also took the gold pounds, but without counting them, he only made a rough estimate before putting them in his pocket. His gaze swept around again, and he found that apart from the woman, no one else was willing to continue buying. It seems that most of them haven't entered the mid-sequence yet, or they're already short on funds and won't rashly spend over 1,000 pounds to buy Beyond ingredient that won't be useful for their future promotion. Leonardo thought to himself, half sighing and half pondering, and decided to choose a Beyond gathering of a higher standard. He wasn't worried that Klein would recognize his identity with these Beyond ingredients, since Klein already knew that Leonardo Mayor Connor was still alive. It didn't matter, the two were on the same side. Finally, Darkwill did not rush to acquire the Beast Tamer formula, and several more deals fell through before Isengard announced the end of the deal. That's enough for today. As usual, we'll leave one by one, with a 3-minute interval between each other. Leonardo stood up and, led by a waiter, left the living room and went to the great door. He removed his mask and hooded robe, and followed the path he remembered back to the back door of Braveheart's bar. He didn't leave immediately, but amidst the noise of barking dogs and shouting men, he walked through the kitchen and waited for Isengard at the door entrance. He was the second to last to come out, and exactly 3 minutes later, he saw Isengard taking off his robe. "Little Poirot, I didn't expect you to wait for me," Isengard remarked, saying goodbye to Caspers before walking over to Leonardo and lowering his voice to say, "I want your 6-armed Naga liver, market price £1,500. Leonardo hesitated slightly, but still agreed to the deal, while Isengard said that the goods would be exchanged after they returned. "But your performance today was truly remarkable. I never expected you to have so much knowledge. This is very much in line with your detection ability. You are amazing in every aspect. I believe that if you were to meet Prince Edisic, he would be amazed by your talent." Isengard stepped down from the carriage with a sigh and led Leonardo back to their lodgings. Leonardo paid no attention to Isengard's praise, his mind was filled with the day's achievements. Using the barbarian recipe, he traded for a runic steel sword worth £800. He sold most of the Beander ingredient he had accumulated, earning a full £4,000. 15 Minsk Street. Klein sat on the sofa and recognized Leonardo, who had also attended the Beander party that evening and witnessed Leonardo's accomplishments. He thought to himself with amusement, "How about I borrow some money from him?" 124 Chapter 124 The Complete Life of Lanius. Chapter 124 Lenevis, Complete Life. On Wednesday morning, Leonardo sat on the sofa, flipping through the newspaper and reviewing recent events. Aside from the major events that occurred a few days ago in East Borough, aside from the gunfight at Red Brick Alley, there was nothing else noteworthy. With a whoosh, Leonardo quickly glanced at the newspaper, closed it, and picked up the hot tea on the table. Taking a sip of hot tea, Leonardo guessed that Rossigo would likely attack Klein today, and that Ambassador Bakerland would soon be assassinated by Mr. A. To be honest, Leonardo originally wanted to attend one of those high-profile Beander gatherings hosted by Mr. A, where Beyonders' sequences are generally higher than those at gatherings hosted by Isengard Stanton, which makes it easier to sell recipes and beyond ingredients. But that is somewhat dangerous. After all, Mr. A is the messenger of the Aurora Order and the shepherd of Sequence 5. It's entirely possible that I've become too popular and Mr. A might just casually let me go. As Leonardo's thoughts raced, a shadow suddenly appeared beneath his feet, almost covering the entire ground. Is this my messenger, Archer? Drake must have finished digesting the potion by now. As Leonardo was thinking, he saw a dark arm slowly emerge from the shadowy figure and hand him an envelope. He checked the postmark on the envelope and found that it was indeed from Drake. The letter read, "Sir, after you left, I followed your instructions and tried my best to be a good hunter. At the same time, I vaguely understand that, generally speaking, it takes 3 months for a Beander of Sequence 9 to digest a potion, and some even take more than half a year. But I have only been a Beander for less than 2 months. I'm a little confused. I know I don't have any talent in the Beander world. I'm wondering if it's because you made me keep hunting. After all, my pathway is the hunter pathway. Does that speed up my digestion process? In addition, not long ago, someone broke into your room to investigate whether your death was true. Unfortunately, that person's infiltration skills were extremely poor, and I discovered the clues. Since then, I have been searching for the whereabouts of the person who broke into your room. He was also a Beander, but his pathway was unknown. I eventually managed to locate him in Tingen City. Hey, you'd never guess that I would actually kill someone. Perhaps because I've been hunting a lot lately, I didn't feel any discomfort when I killed that person. On the contrary, I felt somewhat relieved. It was after that I felt I had completely mastered my potion, which is why I am writing to you." Leonardo casually tossed the letter into the fireplace and watched it turn to ashes. He ignored Archer, who was waiting for knowledge on the floor, and instead began to ponder the contents of Drake's letter. This guy is almost at the point of mastering the acting method. At the same time, he couldn't help but worry, if he masters the acting method before advancing to Sequence 7, I wonder if he will still be considered as having been taught by me. I never imagined that Drake, who used to be more homosexual, would become so twisted under the influence of the potion that he wouldn't even care about killing. Who would break into my room to confirm whether I'm really dead? If what Drake said is true, then this person is definitely not from the demonist sect, since that doesn't fit the assassin's identity. Pathways beyond ability. Leonardo was lost in thought until Isengard woke up and came downstairs, interrupting his thoughts. Little Poirot, you actually have a messenger. Leonardo then realized that he hadn't paid the compensation yet. So he took out a pen and paper, wrote down some basic knowledge about occultism, handed it to Archer on the floor, and released the summons. I only got it by chance, Leonardo replied modestly, not thinking about the contents of Drake's letter, but recalling his request to the hanged man Alger. I wonder when Alger will give me the provoker's Beander ingredient. In addition, he secretly began to make plans in his heart. It's time to find a new teaching target. Leonardo looked at Isengard Stanton and asked, Mr. Stanton, do you know the real identity of the lady who sold me the runic steel sword at the Beyond party that day? No, even if I were the host, I wouldn't know their true identities, Isengard said, shaking his head without pressing further. Leonardo and Isengard haven't been commissioning anything on Door in the last few days, so they've both been quite idle. By the way, I can use simulation. Klein's divination abilities. Leonardo immediately had an idea. So, after exchanging a few words with Isengard, he returned to his room and locked the door. Isengard sipped his coffee, staring at the spot where Leonardo had left, and muttered to himself. This guy has so many secrets. If I observe for a few more days and he can really help me find the stomach of the white-tailed red fox, I can go back to Lindbergh to prepare for my promotion to Sequence 6. Quote, it would be a good choice to hand over the Beander party to him. As Isengard pondered this, he walked out of the door and retrieved a letter from the mailbox outside the courtyard. Instead of returning to his room, he opened the letter on the spot and began to read its contents. It can be preliminarily confirmed that Leonardo Mayor Connor is not actually dead. I asked a guy from the Aurora Order to help me investigate. Although his price was high, the person from the Aurora Order is dead, so I only paid a small deposit. Anyway, they were members of the Aurora Order, so their deaths are nothing to regret. Leonardo sat at his desk, took out the 2081 and put it on his hand. The emerald green gemstone changed color. At the same time, Leonardo wrote on the parchment scroll, the origin of this item. After finishing writing, Leonardo pressed the runic steel sword onto the parchment, leaned back in his chair, and fell asleep. The illusory dream rapidly shifted scenes, yet vanished in an instant. Before Leonardo could even see anything, the dream had already shattered. The divination failed. Sigh, not being able to simulate the original ability can be quite a blow at times. Leonardo sighed, deciding to change his target. He now has two candidates, the lady from the lawyer pathway and Lenevis from the marauder pathway. Lenevis was easier to find than the woman. After all, the location where he lived in Backland is mentioned in the original book. He quickly recalled Lenevis's entire life experience. In Tingen City following the arrival of Evil God's offspring, Lenevis fled to Backland, adopting the alias, Kevin, and had a sapling implanted within him by the true creator, making him the vessel for the true creator's future arrival. Lenevis was thus sensed and protected by the Aurora Order. He took advantage of the conditions required for the descent of the true creator, to be conditioned by a great deal of pessimism, despair, numbness, resentment, and primal evil, and lived in the Dockworkers Guild dormitory in Backland. They created chaos in East Borough, the Factory District, and the Dock District, attempting to incite a strike to attract the attention of the Door Police Department. But after being discovered and tortured by the Aurora Order, he chose to give up and instead sought other methods. He pretended to have a mild loss of control, which gave him the opportunity to vent his anger in the sewers. He secretly used his blood to contaminate some of the creatures living there, turning them into ferocious mutated monsters. But this plan also ended in failure. Lenevis also tried to brutally kill a prostitute, but Aurora Order disguised it as a serial murder case. Following this, Lenevis volunteered to be guarded by the most vicious, insane, and radical members of the Aurora Order, successfully attracting the attention of the Church of the Evernight Goddess. Crest Sesama, leading the Red Gloves Squad, used the sealed artifact, 163 feet in the relic bone sword to separate the true creator divinity from him. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lenevis escaped the control of the Aurora Order. Ultimately, Lenevis was killed by Klein in the sewers of Backland. Leonardo snapped out of his reverie, feeling as if he had just watched a thrilling escape story. He then recalled that at the previous Beander gathering, the member of Black Snake had accepted Darkwill's commission to clean the sewers, so he could roughly guess that Lenevis's escape plan had only just begun and there was no rush. Leonardo suddenly realized a perfect angle and chuckled to himself. That Black Serpent probably hasn't started cleaning up the creatures corrupted by Lenevis yet. I can use my faceless ability to replace him, infiltrate the Aurora Order, and make contact with Lenevis. 125 Chapter 125 Black Serpent. Chapter 125 Black Serpent. Having identified the key to the problem, Leonardo also devised a detailed plan. He could first replace Black Serpent, and, using spirit mediumship, roughly understand the other party's habits and Aurora Order's strongholds. After that, Leonardo can infiltrate the group, volunteer to look after Lenevis, and find opportunities to approach him and teach him the acting method. Furthermore, if we can reach out to the Aurora Order members of each mid-sequence and have them simultaneously comprehend the acting method, that would be a significant leap forward. Going undercover in a cult is exciting in itself. Leonardo immediately recalled that the apothecary, Darkwill, had mentioned a request that only required Black Serpent to clean the sewers in the Backland Bridge area. Having locked onto the location, Leonardo quickly walked out of the room and saw Isengard Stanton still in the living room. Leonardo began by saying, "Mr. Stanton, I have to go out on business." Leonardo fabricated a lie without batting an eye. "Well, you just saw my messenger, which said that there are clues about the white-tailed red fox, and I'm going to help you find it now. I may be away from home frequently during this period and will not be able to fulfill my duties as an assistant. Please understand." Isengard raised an eyebrow but did not stop Leonardo. "Go ahead and do it, little Poirot. This is the kind of drive young people should have." Leonardo put on a vest, pushed open the door, and walked into the still foggy streets of Backland. He flagged down a horse-drawn carriage and headed straight for the Backland Bridge area. About 20 minutes later, Leonardo arrived at his destination and saw the iconic Backland Bridge. Then, in a secluded corner, Leonardo, without the slightest disgust at the filth and stench in the sewer, removed the cover, held his breath, and climbed down the vertical metal stairs. About 10 seconds later, Leonardo landed on his feet and felt the sticky ground. The filth caused goosebumps to break out on his arms and body, but he could only force himself to endure it and continue walking forward through the empty, quiet sewers. A fork in the road appeared ahead, one of which was relatively hidden, and the stench emanating from it was much stronger and more disgusting than from the other places. Without using candles, Leonardo directly simulated the ability of sleepless, significantly improving night vision. Leonardo turned the corner and walked all the way to the end. His enhanced night vision revealed the eerie corner and the still intact, but not, corpses. The Black Serpent is dead. Squeak. The dense swarm of gray rats scattered and fled, but some remained in place, unwilling to leave, reluctant to part with their food. Leonardo suppressed his strong urge to vomit, quickly stepped forward, chased away the rats, and then leaned against the shadow of the wall, where his spirituality began to spread. A vibrant green light suddenly burst forth from between his brows, rippling outwards and quickly covering the entire gloomy corner, like a wall of spirituality, isolating it from the damp and putrid environment. This is the capability of detective, which can analyze and reconstruct events that have occurred within a certain area. Immediately afterwards, the entire corner was filled with a bright green light, and in Leonardo's eyes, he saw the corpse on the ground, sit up. Instead of sitting up like a zombie, his body transformed into a vibrant green information stream, appearing before Leonardo's eyes as if he were seeing a virtual image on Earth. A few seconds later, all living things and objects that had passed through the entire memory area were extracted by this green information stream, and returned to their original positions. A green, ethereal figure intruded, investigating the area. He was gaunt, with sunken cheeks, and tall and thin. Then, one after another, giant rats appeared silently and suddenly, launching an attack from behind the figure. The figure couldn't dodge in time and was pinned down by the giant rat, unable to move. In the end, amidst cries of agony, the giant rat killed the person. The deduction of the information flow ended there, the surrounding environment returned to normal, and the corpse still lay quietly on the ground. Judging from this Black Serpent isn't very strong. He should only be at most sequence 8, and he's a listener, so he doesn't have much direct combat ability. Someone like that would take on a job like this. But Darkwill's description really doesn't seem dangerous at all, it just looks like a normal rat infestation. The incident must have happened last night, and the Black Serpent should not have been discovered by the Aurora Order yet. Leonardo thought to himself as the ring on his finger changed color once more. He simulated Daly's spirit mediumship ability. Inside the room, a cold, invisible breeze silently arose, stirring Leonardo's clothes. The surrounding temperature plummeted, and the emerald green gemstone on 2081 turned a deep, tranquil blue. Leonardo traversed the cosmos-like world in the chaotic storm of thought, entering the mind of the Black Serpent, and seeing its illusory figure floating in midair. "Are you the Black Serpent of the Aurora Order?" Leonardo glanced at him and asked in a deep voice. The phantom of the Black Snake, its eyes lifeless and dazed, answered. "Right." Leonardo followed up with a series of questions. What is your real name? Flynn Dawson. What are your verbal tics? What are your habitual actions? Which pathway do you belong to? How many sequences do you have? What are your Beander abilities? In the Aurora Order, who is your superior? Who are you on good terms with? I am Secret Supplicant Pathways Sequence 8 Feet Listener. Beander's ability is listening, which allows them to directly hear whispers from hidden entities. I've only recently been promoted and haven't yet acquired this unique ability. My superior is Mr. A, the messenger of God. He leads us to believe in the great being, true creator, and we are often sent to monitor and guard a man named Kevin. I prefer to be alone and don't have many close friends. I don't have any particular verbal tic, but I like to keep my head down. After gathering the information, Leonardo suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head, and his body involuntarily flew out of the storm of thought. Before long, he emerged from spirit mediumship, feeling only a hollow, twitching sensation in his head. During the spirit mediumship, Black Serpent incident, Leonardo seemed to hear the same insane babbling as the other creature. While this didn't cause him to lose control, it still stung Leonardo deeply. Fortunately, the people in the Aurora Order are all lunatics, and it's difficult for them to interact with people in a normal way. They're probably the kind of guys who are extremely enamored with Mr. A and would become fanatical believers at the mere mention of true creator. Moreover, he has only recently been promoted and hasn't yet acquired unique, twisted abilities, otherwise I really wouldn't be able to simulate him. Leonardo felt more confident about his attempt to dive into the Aurora Borealis. Actually, the biggest obstacle is Mr. A. As long as we can keep it from him, we can ignore the rest of the lunatics. Leonardo's fingertip 2081 changed color again, and he simulated the faceless ability by wiping his face with his hand. His round face became thinner, he grew taller, and his body became thinner as well. At the same time, Leonardo suddenly felt something slowly following him from behind. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.